Chapter 758. Wu Qingyue finally got the chance to pick up Ling Ling and stay in the base. How could he return to his base just because of a random order from China? He told Xiao Liqing to reply to China. He's busy and doesn't have time to deal with the zombie emperor. Just let him grow. Anyway, the zombie emperor wants to deal with China, not Haiqing. Xiao Liqing looked at his leader with a black face. Leader, if you reply like this, you'll get revenge. Wu Qingyue smiled and waved his hand. It's fine if it's a small fight, I'll take it. Even if it's a big one, it won't dare to do anything serious. The most important thing for him now was to get his zombie wife. He didn't have time to care about China or the zombie emperor. In any case, the zombie emperor didn't come here. Xiao Liqing had a helpless expression. If his leader wanted to be stubborn, he couldn't do anything about it. Lin Xiao, who was hiding in her office, looked at Xie Dong and said, "What? He's not going? Wouldn't China be sad? They obviously wanted him to be their main force. If he went, they would definitely give him a lot of benefits. Why didn't he go?" Xie Dong looked at her and shook his head. He didn't understand why Wu Qingyue would reject China's invitation. He didn't even go back to Haiqing and stayed in the base as if nothing had happened. Lin Xiao frowned because Wu Qingyue was annoyed that he was staying in the base. "What's the situation in the Black Dragon base?" She leaned back on her chair and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Xie Dong said in a hoarse voice, "It's divided into two groups. One group stayed in the Black Dragon's underground base, while the other group fled the base. When Gao Haoyan left, he didn't bring the survivors with him. However, there were many who felt that there was no hope and escaped. According to the information obtained from the survivors who escaped after the zombie wave broke out, the number of people who died was not small. The number of casualties was about 50,000. The number of people who escaped is uncertain. The damage to the buildings in the Black Dragon's base wasn't that great, but the ordinary zombies didn't retreat when the corpse tide rushed in." Lin Xiao listened to the news and asked, "Gao Haoyan's departure must have disappointed the survivors. Who led the remaining survivors?" "The other leader is Du Kuanxing and his subordinates. There should be quite a number of survivors left," Xie Dong replied. "It seems like they want to hide underground for a period of time and wait for the corpse tide to calm down before coming out to rebuild their base." Lin Xiao could roughly guess the mentality of the survivors who would rather hide underground. "Mo Yin let Gao Haoyan leave just like that?" she asked curiously. With Mo Yan's ability, even a helicopter could be struck down by lightning. How could he let the other party slip away so easily? Speaking of Mo Yin, Xie Dong's expression became a little hesitant. Mo Yan's situation seems a little strange. "Oh, what's wrong?" Lin Xiao asked curiously. On the day Gao Haoyan left, Mo Yin did send down quite a lot of lightning. However, the lightning bolt that he sent down was not aimed at Gao Haoyan's helicopter. The lightning bolt that descended at that time was very unstable. Also, the frequency is sometimes fast and sometimes slow, and the area of focus is sometimes in the east and sometimes in the west. Although a few helicopters were shot down, they couldn't stop Gao Haoyan's helicopter, Xie Dong said. Then he thought of something and continued. Moreover, the state of his aura seemed to be off at that time. Even the first and second rank king tiers around him all retreated far away. None of them dared to approach him. "What's going on?" "According to what you said, he seemed to have lost control." Lin Xiao looked at him and guessed. "I don't know the specifics, but because I didn't dare to get too close, I could only sense from afar. His aura at that time was indeed very unstable, and it was very violent," Xie Dong said thoughtfully. Lin Xiao lowered his eyebrows and thought back to the last 2 times he faced Mo Yin. There was nothing wrong with that kid's aura. Why would it become unstable now? Does anyone else know about his situation? Lin Xiao looked at Xie Dong and asked. "Probably not. The other senses aren't as sharp as ours," Xie Dong said. Of course, the senses of humans weren't as sharp as those of zombies. Also, when Mo Yin acted up, his subordinates retreated far away. However, they were guarding him from all directions, and the others couldn't get close. Lin Xiao nodded and said to him, "You continue to watch Mo Yan's movements, and also see if there are people from the bases in China who are willing to help." "Yes, sir," Xie Dong answered, turned around, and left. Lin Xiao continued to look at the statistics of the new batch of survivors in his hands. On the other side, Wang Jian, Li Honglin, and Lu Hao had just joined the base 2 days ago. After registering their basic information with Yuan Tianxing, they were all assigned places to stay. We are metahumans. How can we live with these ordinary people? However, when they arrived at the place to stay, they expressed their dissatisfaction. This was because they were actually arranged to live with the ordinary people who came with them before. Although the place was not bad, they originally thought that they were better than others, so they should live in a better area. The soldier who brought them in said impatiently, "It's already good enough that you guys are staying. If you want to change places, use your points to exchange. If you have enough points, you can even live on your own." Points? What points? The people who had just arrived were confused. Another soldier who was easier to talk to said, "The base's contribution points. Those who contribute to the base will receive points. There's no difference between metahumans and ordinary people here. We are all humans, and those with abilities don't necessarily have to be metahumans. Metahumans don't necessarily bring more benefits to the base." Why not? Us metahumans can go out and hunt. Do you ordinary people dare to go out? The new metahuman said with some dissatisfaction. The soldier pointed to the ordinary people who came with them. Although they can't hunt, they still relied on their own strength to get here. All right, enough with the nonsense. If you don't want to live here, you can. There's a metal shed below. Do you want to go there? The soldier said impatiently. He hated these metahumans the most, their arrogant attitude. Did they really think that without metahumans, ordinary people couldn't survive? Wang Jian and his subordinates were assigned to the same room, while Li Honglin and the rest were not assigned to the same room. What made Chun Hao happy was that Lu Tong was in the same room as him. But Li Honglin wasn't here, so he didn't have the strength to protect him. When Lu Tong found out that he was assigned to the same room as Chun Hao, he immediately felt a sense of danger. But he couldn't show it. He could only secretly try to find a way to change rooms. Chapter 759. However, after searching for 2 days, he still could not find anyone he knew. Lu Tong could only return to his living quarters dejectedly. The 1,000+ people were also staying in the buildings around the school. Moreover, it was a suite. The living quarters of the other batch of people were quite good because there were fewer people and more land in the base. The accommodations arranged for them were either inside the school or in the vicinity. What? You want to change rooms? Why? Isn't it better to stay with me? Chun Hao watched Lu Tong return from his room. He knew what Lu Tong was doing. Lu Tong looked around the room and saw that there was no one else around. His expression turned cold. Chun Hao, I know what you're planning. Isn't it because I know about you? However, you should also know that I'm a spatial ability user, and I've already registered here. You better not do anything unnecessary. Lu Tong looked at Chun Hao and said coldly, "What unnecessary things? Don't worry, I won't do anything. Rather than guarding against me, you might as well guard against Wang Jian and the rest. Don't forget, it was your idea to capture them to lure the zombies." Chun Hao said with a smile. Even when he was smiling, his ferocious face looked terrifying. The ones who did it were you guys, not me. They should be looking for you guys. I'm under your protection. Lu Tong still had a cold smile on his face, ignoring Chun Hao's words. He was a space-type ability user, a rare resource that was protected in every base. This was because when the base sent people out to collect resources, they would always find a spatial ability user to bring them out. Protecting him alone was much easier than protecting those trucks. However, Lu Tong was not worried about Wang Jian and the rest. Grudges outside the base could not be brought into the base. In other words, he only needed to avoid Wang Jian and the rest when he left the base to carry out missions. However, Chun Hao was staying in the same room as him, so it was much easier to deal with him in secret. Wang Jian and the rest also knew that they could not kill anyone in the base, so any grudges could only be settled outside. Thus, when Wang Jian and the others saw Li Honglin and the others, they could only watch from the sidelines despite the fact that they wanted to bite them to death. TCH, don't push the blame onto us. In any case, this day will come sooner or later, just wait. At the very least, I won't do anything to you as long as you don't tell anyone about me. I believe you won't say anything. Chen Hao looked at him. His last sentence was a statement. Of course I won't, but if you dare to have any ill intentions towards me, then I can't be sure. Lu Tong nodded. The expression on his pale, handsome face was calm, as if he had really come to terms with Chen Hao. Chen Hao's eyes flickered slightly as he looked at him. He just grinned and didn't say anything else. At this moment, someone came in. They were the subordinates Chen Hao had sent out to gather information. The subordinate glanced coldly at Lu Tong before looking at Chen Hao and saying, "Boss, I found out some information." Chen Hao got up, turned around, and went into his room. "Come in." They lived in a suite with 3 bedrooms and 2 living rooms, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom. The house was very big, so they arranged for 5 or 6 people to live in it, 2 people to a room. The leader here is very mysterious. She's a woman. According to the others, it's a woman similar to the original leader of the Netherworld King. After entering the room, the subordinate walked up to Chen Hao and whispered, "Women? Mysterious? How mysterious? Does it look like the leader of the Netherfire? Do they look alike, or what?" Chen Hao asked with some surprise. "It's a woman. I heard she's very beautiful. I said she's mysterious because she's rarely seen." Most of the matters in this base are handled by Deputy Chief Yuan and Deputy Chief Lin Feng. Although the female leader is very beautiful, she looks different from the leader of the Netherfire. She's very young. I heard she's only in her 20s. Rather than similar, it's more like her temperament and aura. They're both very tough and clean, the subordinate replied. Lu Hao frowned slightly and thought for a moment, then said, "Lin Feng is now the deputy chief." "That's right." The subordinate nodded and continued. "Not only has he been promoted to deputy chief, but his ability has also risen to rank 7. "What? Isn't it rank 6? Chen Hao was slightly shocked. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at the subordinate. He couldn't believe that Lin Feng's ability was rank 7. It had only been half a year. When Lin Feng escaped from the Netherworld King's base, he had just broken through to rank 6. How did he rise to rank 7 so quickly? "Boss, it's not just Lin Feng. Deputy Chief Yuan has also risen to rank 7. And I heard that this female leader has a group of mysterious subordinates around her. Each of their ability levels aren't low. They're all secretive, just like this female leader," the subordinate said excitedly. Chen Hao was silent for a moment, then said, "No wonder this base could be built so close to Sea City. Looks like this female leader isn't simple. All right, have you found out the whereabouts of the Lin family?" "I've found some, but I don't dare to be too brazen. After all, we've just arrived," the subordinate said hesitantly. The subordinate thought for a moment and said cautiously, "Boss, the members of the Lin family are all important figures in this base. Except for Lin Feng, who is the deputy leader, all the members of the Lin family are important figures in this base. Other than Lin Feng, Lin Hao is also one of the heads of the research department and the medical department. There's also Lin Wenwen. She's now the leader of the resource collection team. She's no longer the young mistress who was protected by others. Do you plan to?" He didn't finish the last sentence, only looking at Chen Hao. "It's fine, we're not doing anything big. We just need to do something to make them suspect Lu Tong. We don't need to do anything to Lu Tong. He won't leave the base if we wait for him. Why don't we let the manager of this base deal with him?" Chen Hao said with a cold smile. His eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. "Then what should we do?" "Boss, what do you think?" "But if word gets out, we'll be done for," the subordinate said with some trepidation. Although he didn't agree with Chen Hao's idea, he didn't dare to say it out loud. "We don't need to do it. Just let Wang Jian do it. All we have to do is do it discreetly," Chen Hao said with a sinister smile. He then had the subordinate lean his ear closer. "Come here, I'll tell you. Find a way to lure Lin Feng's daughter out." Chen Hao whispered to the subordinate what to do. On the other side, Lin Xiao was forced by her mother and Lin Wenwen to go to Lin Hao for examination. Mrs. Lin says to Lin Luoran worriedly, "I didn't agree with you going to the Tsangyan city, but I know that you won't listen to me when you make a decision. But now, you have to think about the child in your belly. Your body is dead, not your life alone. If there's anything, Just let Lin Feng and Tian Xing handle it. Pala pala pala. Chapter 760. Lin Wenwen also stares at her belly worriedly and asks, "It's been several months, but there's nothing wrong with it. Will it be okay?" Big, boss, are you sure she's okay? It's been 4 or 5 months, but Lin Xiao's belly is still flat, even though she knows it's not an ordinary baby. Seeing that Lin Xiao is always running around, Mrs. Lin, who has nothing to do, starts to worry about her health. So, when Lin Xiao comes back this time, Mrs. Lin can't help but take her to Lin Hao for a checkup. She's fine. She can eat and sleep. She's fine. Lin Xiao is speechless. She knows her belly best. However, her family's worry is for her own good, so she can't say anything. You still need to check her regularly. Let Lin Hao check her. He said there's no equipment before. Now that we have found the equipment, we need to check the baby's development. Mrs. Lin looks at Lin Xiao and says, "Mom is right. Just listen to me. Let Lin Hao check her." Lin Wenwen echoes Mrs. Lin's words. "Okay, I know." Lin Xiao can only sigh and listen to their arrangement. In the future, you'd better come to Lin Hao for a checkup every time you come back. Even if it's not for you, you have to do it for the baby. Mrs. Lin says to her earnestly. When they arrive at Lin Hao's place, Lin Hao is already prepared. He directly asks her to lie down and take off her clothes to show her belly. Of course, there's nothing to be embarrassed about in front of his brother. Lin Hao carefully looks at the condition of her belly with a doctor's attitude. Looking at the picture on the monitor, Lin Hao is a little surprised. Finally, after printing out the film, he points at a small dot on it and says, "Look, this is the baby. Judging from the shape, it should have just passed the embryo stage. In other words, it has entered the growth stage. That is, when the pregnancy is 3 months old, it is said to have passed the critical period. And the size is normal like a normal baby. It was just that in terms of development time, it was too slow. By the way, sister, you and that man, well, it should be last October, right?" After talking about the baby, Lin Hao glances at Lin Xiao and asks. Lin Xiao gets up and pulls up her clothes. She takes the film and looks at the small dot on it. Her heart was filled with warmth, causing the corners of her mouth to curl up unconsciously. Hearing Lin Hao's question, the corners of his mouth immediately drooped. He nodded lightly, and Lin Hao looked at her, his handsome face full of curiosity as he said, "Who is it? Don't tell me you want to wait until the child's father comes knocking on your door to tell everyone?" They had come knocking on his door. Lin Xiao rolled his eyes in his heart, but on the surface he said indifferently, "If he really dares to come, then we'll see." Lin Hao also rolled his eyes, exactly the same as Lin Xiao. He said, "Don't tell me that they don't know about this child. Aren't you going to tell him? This child is different from normal children." Lin Xiao touched her belly as a gentle light flashed in her eyes. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Lin Hao's eyes turned cold. She said, "Are you afraid that he doesn't want this child?" Lin Xiao looked up at him without saying a word. Until now, they still didn't know if the child would be a human or a zombie. "If that's the case, then I agree with your idea." Lin Hao's eyes flashed with a faint cold light. Then he suddenly frowned and said, "This child doesn't have a heartbeat. Normal children would form a fetal heart in 50 to 60 days, and by this time, there should be a heartbeat. But when he checked the child just now, he didn't hear the sound of the fetal heart beating." "What do you mean?" Lin Xiao was slightly stunned. Then she stared at him closely. "Nothing, don't be nervous. Although the child doesn't have a heartbeat, there seems to be no other problems. But this still needs to wait for a while to see how it develops. And before the fetus is formed, the fetal heart will form first, then the fetus. Since the child is already formed, then this heartbeat, maybe it's because of you?" Although Lin Hao said so, his expression was full of doubt. Anyway, he didn't understand this kind of situation, and he wasn't an attending physician. Because of Lin Xiao, he found a lot of medical books about this to study, but he could only study some basic ones. But at least now, although the child was developing slowly, it was still growing. This was a good sign. Your situation has been developing in a good direction, but I don't know how long it will take for your child to be born full term. Lin Hao comforted Lin Xiao and changed the topic. Lin Xiao nodded. although he was relieved in his heart. But in the corner of his heart, he still felt a little lost because the child didn't have a heartbeat. Without a heartbeat, would there be no heartbeat in the future? So when little Man was born, it might be a child without a heartbeat. Wouldn't it become a zombie? After coming out, Mrs. Lin and Lin Wenwen immediately leaned over and asked Lin Hao anxiously, "How is it? Is the child doing well?" Lin Hao glanced at Lin Xiao and saw Lin Xiao nodding calmly. Then he said to Mrs. Lin, "Mom, the child is fine. It's just that the development is much slower than a normal fetus. So I don't know how long it will take for the child to be born. Looking at the current situation, the child has just formed. In terms of time, a normal fetus would need 3 months, but this child would need 5 months. Then there are still 6 months left. In this way, I guess we have to wait for another 10 months or so. Of course, this is just my guess at the moment. The actual situation will have to wait until the child is born." Lin Hao didn't tell them about the situation of the fetus's heart, only the optimistic situation. So, it will add up to 15 months? So, this child is still much slower than a normal fetus. Lin Wenwen looked at Lin Xiao's flat belly blankly and murmured, "I see. It's okay, as long as the child can be born safely." Mrs. Lin breathed a sigh of relief and then asked, "Are the adults and the child okay?" Lin Hao nodded and said, "The leader's body is fine, and the child is also fine." That's good, that's good." Mrs. Lin was finally relieved. "Well, the examination is done. Let's go back. Don't delay Lin Hao's work. Now the medical department is very busy." Lin Xiao said, and gently held Mrs. Lin's arm as they left Lin Hao's office. After 2 steps, they suddenly remembered the report that said that among the ordinary people who came from Pluto, there was a person who was awakening a superpower. It seemed that 2 days had passed, and he still hadn't awakened. Lin Xiao stopped and turned back to ask Lin Hao, "By the way, where is the person who is still awakening?" Chapter 761. He's in the isolation ward. Lin Hao said, "Let's go and take a look." Lin Xiao said directly. Lin Hao nodded and took her to the direction of the awakening isolation zone. "You guys go back first. I'll be careful." Lin Xiao turned to her mother and said. When they were outside the office, Lin Xiao didn't call her mother and directly talked about the child. Mrs. Lin nodded and understood what Lin Xiao meant. Although she didn't know why Lin Xiao wanted to see the newly awakened person, she didn't disturb her. Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Wenwen, and Lin Wenwen immediately nodded in understanding. He took his mother's hand and led her out. "How's the person now?" Lin Xiao walked with Lin Hao and asked while looking forward. Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen, who were guarding outside Lin Hao's office, silently followed behind them. Although he used the energy lake water you gave him to suppress the high temperature, his body temperature is still very high. It's almost 50 degrees, but it's much better than before. But can he really awaken successfully? Will it suppress his awakening? Lin Hao looked at Lin Xiao and said with uncertainty, "Many superpowers failed to awaken because they stayed in the state of high fever for too long. In the end, they couldn't endure the high fever and awaken before the body functions were destroyed. When the body functions were destroyed to varying degrees, it was already too late. The superpower was awakened, but the body was damaged. Therefore, the damaged body couldn't bear the energy after awakening. It would directly explode or spontaneously burn, and many other failures. There were no new superpowers awakened in the base recently. Lin Xiao's lake water didn't seem to be used on adults except for the 2 children, Lin Xiaolu and Lingling. Lin Xiao didn't know if it could suppress the high fever and awaken the superpower. "Let's take a look first," Lin Xiao said. After Lin Xiao and the others walked to the isolation ward, they saw there was an ordinary young man in addition to the guards outside the door. Seeing Lin Xiao and the others coming, the young man immediately stood up from the chair next to him. "Dr. Lin, can he awaken successfully?" The young man knew that his question was actually meaningless. But if he didn't ask, his heart wouldn't be at peace. This was because everyone knew that the awakening depended on the individual's own situation. No matter how anxious others were, they couldn't help him. Let's wait and see. His condition is stable. His body functions are still running normally. There's no big problem at the moment. By the way, are you his family? Lin Hao comforted the young man. No, we just took care of each other on the way. The young man shook his head. Lin Hao nodded and didn't say anything. Seeing that Lin Hao was no longer speaking, the young man then noticed the three women next to him. He knew Duan Wan, but he did not know Lin Xiao and Shen Yuzhen. However, when he saw Lin Xiao and Lin Hao walking side by side, and even Duan Wan, the former captain of Pluto King's base's personal guards, standing behind them, the young man tactfully did not say anything and retreated to the side. The young man's action. Lin didn't see the youngs. The young man, Lin. The young man's didn't Lin. How? Lin Chong Lin. The guard and Chong opened, one. The guard looked at him and smiled. Lin at the guard. He Lin. Bye. Long look. Lin. Chong. Lin looked at Lin. He. Lin. You're lucky today. The young man's eyes widened in surprise. He was just guessing. He didn't expect it to be true. He nodded in agreement. Looks like I'm lucky to be able to see Lin. But Lin is so young, he looked like he was in his 20s. Although Lin Xiao's aura was very strong, she looked much younger than Lu Tianyu, who used to wear all kinds of heavy makeup. After entering the isolation ward, in order to prevent the energy from exploding, the wards in the awakening area were reinforced with protective measures. Lin Xiao and the others stood in front of the glass window and looked inside. I heard that this person was dying. He had a severe flu, a high fever, and he was hungry. He only relied on drinking water to get to our base. I didn't expect him to suddenly awaken when he was about to die. I don't know if he's fated to die or if he was met by some deity. Lin Hao introduced the man's situation. Lin Xiao stood at the door and squinted at the situation inside. Others were looking at the instruments, but Lin Xiao could see the energy flow in the man's body. She saw an icy blue energy flowing up and down the man's body and finally converging into a ball in his mind. In addition to this icy blue energy, there was also a familiar green energy mixed in with the icy blue energy. It seemed to be suppressing the speed of its flow. Although the energy core in his mind hadn't taken shape yet, it would eventually take shape when the time was right. As for the explosion or spontaneous combustion, it didn't seem like it would happen. His situation is not serious. If I'm not wrong, he will successfully form an energy core in 2 or 3 days. In 2 or 3 days, it will successfully form an energy core. It might be an ice type. Lin Xiao opened his eyes and said, Huh? You can see his situation clearly? And you can tell what element it is? Lin Hao looked at her in surprise. I can see the color of everyone's energy, and I can also see the person inside. Your leader, am much more powerful than before. Lin Xiao suddenly turned his head and patted Lin Hao's shoulder with a smile. Lin Hao, who didn't know what to say, looked at her silently. Duan Wan, who looked inexplicably confident. Shen Yuzhen, who didn't understand what was going on. Send his detailed report to my office. Lin Xiao turned and left with Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen. Lin Xiao was even more certain that her lake water was very helpful to the awakening of humans. She heaved a sigh of relief. Yes, Lin Hao responded. After seeing that there was nothing else, Lin Xiao returned to the hotel. But before she reached her office, she felt Wu Qingyue and Lingling's presence inside. Lin Xiao frowned in pain. Her teeth started to hurt inexplicably. No matter how free you are, don't always come to my office, okay? Don't you find it annoying? Lin Xiao returned to her expressionless face as she glanced at Wu Qingyue on the sofa. As usual, Wu Yueling happily pounced towards Lin Xiao, holding a round gray rabbit in her arms. Before Wu Qingyue raised his head to speak, Lin Xiao suddenly changed the topic. She looked at the rabbit in Lingling's arms and said, Hey, this rabbit is fat enough. You can kill it now. Wu Yueling, who suddenly stopped. The gray rabbit in Wu Yueling's arms. Wu Qingyue, who raised his head and was about to speak. Chapter 762. Look at how nervous you are. I'm just kidding. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Yueling with a smile and walked to his desk. Wu Yueling's expression was a bit hesitant. She looked at the rabbit in her arms, and then at Lin Xiao. Then she rolled her eyes, put the fat rabbit on the ground, and walked to Lin Xiao. Why don't you go to China? Maybe you can get a lot of good things back this time. Lin Xiao sat on the office chair and didn't start working. Instead, he crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the chair, looking at Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue heard from her words that she wanted him to leave. She wanted him to leave quickly. It didn't matter if he went to China or not. Do you hate me? The smile on his face disappeared, and his eyes, which were usually squinted into crescent moons, also opened. He looked at Lin Xiao expressionlessly. His eyes flashed with an unknown light. Lin Xiao was slightly startled, but the expression on his face only flashed. He looked into her eyes and said, I don't hate you, but I don't like you either. I want to ask you, why did you propose? Don't say it's for little man. You should know that this child is not a normal child. I don't know what she will be like when she is born, but I don't think the chance of her becoming a human is very high. What she meant was that this child was definitely a mutant. Wu Qingyue was a normal man and the leader of a base. If he wanted to raise this mutant child by his side, it would have a great impact on him. Which human survivor in the base would be willing to let their leader raise a mutant child who might be a zombie or something? Wu Qingyue looked at the door, which was tightly closed, indicating that their conversation in the office would not be heard by others. He looked at Lin Xiao and said, no matter what she will become, since she has my genes, she is my child. If I can't even protect my own child, what kind of man am I? What's the point of being a leader? After Wu Qingyue stopped smiling, he looked a lot more serious. His handsome face had a sharp look, and under the calmness in his eyes, there was a faint light floating. He frowned slightly and stared at Lin Xiao. Even if you want to be responsible for this child, I've said it before, you can find other ways to make it up to little man. You don't have to marry me. What's the point of marrying a woman you don't even like? Lin Xiao looked at him indifferently and said, who said I'm going to marry a woman I don't like? Besides, you should at least let little man have a father, right? Wu Qingyue's heart was slightly moved, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face as he said. The sharpness on his face also disappeared in a flash. He returned to his previous expression of a smiling fox. You don't even like me, but you still want to marry me. Am I wrong? As for the matter of little man calling him daddy, I didn't say that you can't come and acknowledge her. If she wants to call you father, I don't mind, Lin Xiao said indifferently. Wu Qingyue just looked at her with a faint smile and fell silent. Lin Xiao raised his eyebrows at his inexplicable smile, looked at him indifferently, and said nothing. After the two of them looked at each other for a while, Wu Qingyue suddenly stood up. He slowly walked to Lin Xiao's desk, slightly bent over, spread his hands, and leaned on her desk. He lowered his head and leaned his face against Lin Xiao's front. He slowly closed the distance between their faces. Lin Xiao looked at his handsome face without retreating, and her temples slightly twitched. When Wu Qingyue heard Lin Xiao say that he wanted to marry a woman he didn't like, he subconsciously denied it. There was an inexplicable voice in his heart that didn't want to admit Lin Xiao's words. If he didn't like her, why did he pay so much attention to her? If he didn't like her, why didn't he mind when she forced herself on him for the first time? And why didn't he mind her current zombie identity? Originally, he just thought that he was interested in her and wanted to know more about her. Until he had a second relationship with her, something in his heart had slowly changed. At the same time, his heart also had a desire for this female zombie. After tasting the marrow, he wanted to taste it. The two erotic scenes that often appeared in his mind, and the feeling that his soul had seeped into his bones. That was why he wanted to use the matter of the child to entangle her by his side. So when Lin Xiao said this, his heart slightly moved, and he immediately understood something. Wu Qingyue smiled and moved in front of Lin Xiao, and then his crescent moon eyes refracted a touch of light that people couldn't distinguish and directly shot into Lin Xiao's green eyes. He curved the corner of his beautiful mouth and gently said, maybe I still don't know what true love is, but I know. At least now, I can't ignore your existence here. As Wu Qingyue said this, he raised his right hand and pointed to his heart. His eyes were still tightly locked on Lin Xiao's eyes, wanting to see the emotions in her eyes. Lin Xiao's eyes slightly opened, and there was indeed some emotions in her eyes. She looked at Wu Qingyue in a daze, and then felt that it was inconceivable. Then, her eyes slightly narrowed, and she smiled. Lin Xiao didn't move and said, "It can't be. Leader Wu actually fell in love with a strong. That female zombie who beat you? And thinking about what I did in the past, it should be annoying, right?" Wu Qingyue straightened up and put down the hand that was pointing at his heart. He looked at her with a smile, and a soft light flashed in his eyes. He said, "If it wasn't because I was raped by you, I would probably have to live alone for the rest of my life. I still have to thank you, no matter who you used to be. I just want the current you." Lin Xiao's whole body trembled from the soft light in his eyes. She couldn't help but rub the goosebumps on her arms and said with a face of disgust, "Are you also a masochist?" "Sorry, the things I did in the past. Well, I'm not clear-headed. I've forgotten. So please, Leader Wu, forget it too." Lin Xiao was referring to the incident where Lu Tianyu raped her. Anyway, she didn't do it. Why did she still have to deal with this mess after such a long time? "You wish. You said that the first time will be offset by the second time, but I haven't agreed yet. So, I think it's not bad for the two of us to live together. Just promise me?" Wu Qingyue looked at her with a smile, then suddenly pointed to Wu Yueling and said, "And Lingling has always wanted you to live with us, right?" Lingling. After saying that, he shamelessly blinked at Wu Yueling in front of Lin Xiao's face. Wu Yueling immediately looked up at Lin Xiao and nodded vigorously. A pair of big eyes sparkled and looked at Lin Xiao expectantly. Chapter 763. Lin Xiao silently glanced at Wu Yueling, then rolled her eyes at Wu Qingyue. It wasn't the first time that man had played such a shameless trick. She couldn't win an argument against him, so why did he let Ling Ling do it? What happened next made Lin Xiao even more speechless. "I want to sleep with Daddy and Zombie Mommy." Wu Yueling looked at Lin Xiao with her adorable eyes while suddenly saying that in her head. Hearing that, Lin Xiao's expression almost cracked. "What kind of weird idea did you put in Ling Ling's head again?" Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue with discontentment. "What do I mean? What do you mean by weird idea? She's my daughter. Of course, I'm teaching her the right idea." Wu Qingyue narrowed his eyes and smiled while waving at Wu Yueling. Then, he looked at Lin Xiao and said, "You seem to be able to read her mind. You're the first one except for me. So, all she can think about now is sleeping with you and me. Why does she want the three of us to sleep together? Who told her that? Would she think about that herself?" Lin Xiao rolled her eyes and said with discontentment. Wu Qingyue looked at her with surprise, then at Wu Yueling. Had the kid ever expressed her thoughts so straightforwardly? Wu Yueling walked to Wu Qingyue's side, held his trousers, and raised her head to look at him. Wu Qingyue smilingly scooped Wu Yueling up and said to Lin Xiao, "I just want a mommy. Besides, it's normal for mommy and daddy to sleep together, isn't it? How can that be a weird idea? I won't give up anyway. You need to realize that too." While speaking, he smilingly walked to the couch and sat down. Lin Xiao, who had experienced Wu Qingyue's shameless behavior again, didn't know what to say. Right at that moment, a knock was heard from the door. "Come in." Lin Xiao relaxed her arms, then sat up straight and started flipping through the files on the desk. She responded with a bland voice. The door was opened, but it wasn't Lin Xiao who came in. Xiao Liqing nodded at Lin Xiao, then turned to his chief. Wu Qingyue glanced at him, then stood up from the couch and said, "All right, since Chief Lu is going to start working, we won't disturb you." After saying that, she pulled Wu Yueling out of the room. Wu Yueling glanced back at Lin Xiao, then suddenly curved her little face in a smile. However, it soon disappeared. Lin Xiao and Xiao Liqing, who had just walked in, rolled their eyes together. He had already come to sit in someone else's office, and he still had the nerve to say that he wouldn't disturb them. What the hell? Lin Xiao complained in her head. He came over and said a bunch of ridiculous things, and he still had the nerve to say that he didn't want to disturb them. No one could be as thick-skinned as him. Wu Qingyue felt that if he didn't like her, why would he want to marry her? Previously, he had only found it suspicious that she had suddenly become a completely different person, which was why he had been attracted to her. However, When he had been silently observing her movements, he realized that she had a decisive and unyielding manner. Although her zombie eyes were as black as ink, they were calmly protecting everyone in her camp or zombies. He was cold and protective of his own people. However, he couldn't do anything about a child. She was fearless in the face of enemies, but she was always at a disadvantage in front of his lingling. Every time he saw this, he felt that this female zombie was quite cute. She just didn't know when it started. Did his care for her turn into liking her? It seemed that ever since the weird Viney trapped the two of them, his mood had started to change slowly. Wu Qingyue thought about Lin Xiao's slim waist and her smooth and elastic skin. There was also the helpless expression on her beautiful face that she was trying her best to suppress. Thinking about that, Wu Qingyue couldn't help but feel agitated. His blood heated up slightly. But soon he sighed. Lin Xiao wasn't insensitive to feelings. She was just on guard. So, when would he be able to eat her up again? He had been fantasizing all the time. His fiancée could no longer satisfy him. She's so guarded against me. What should I do to win her heart? It's useless to just help her. I want her to like me, not be grateful to her. In the end, I feel like I'm up to something bad. Wu Qingyue walked out and looked at Xiao Liqing as he said, I've never pursued anyone. How am I supposed to know? Xiao Liqing shrugged. I think I still have a long way to go. Wu Qingyue sighed dispiritedly. He felt that it would take him more time and effort to win the beauty back. However, he didn't plan to give up. Time, right? I have time. Time, right? I'll find a way to win her heart. If I can't, time will do the trick. Oh, what do you want to talk to me about? Wu Qingyue paused briefly as he thought of what he wanted to talk about. There's a new change in Huaxia base, said Xiao Liqing. What change? Isn't it just a zombie emperor? Huaxia base is so powerful. Gao Haoyan is also there. Can't they handle it? Wu Qingyue held Wu Yueling's hand and said while walking, There's a change in the zombie emperor situation. I've received a message. It seems that after the massive zombie attack, violent lightning bolts will strike from the sky from time to time. The lightning bolts aren't stable, and the lightning bolts aren't stable either. I think the lightning-powered zombie emperor seems to be very agitated, said Xiao Liqing. So? Wu Qingyue glanced at him, waiting for him to continue. So, based on what we've been seeing, a large number of zombies are gathering toward Huaxia base. The first wave of zombies is from Heilong province, and the second wave is from the cities where Huaxia base is located. We've also found out that apart from Huaxia base, zombies from the surrounding cities have also been gathering toward Huaxia base. That number, I'm afraid. Xiao Liqing wore a serious look while saying the last few words. Surrounding cities? Wu Qingyue paused as he turned to Xiao Liqing and asked for confirmation. If zombies from a few cities gathered together, it wouldn't be as simple as a massive zombie attack. This number added up to more than 10 million. That's right. All zombies from the surrounding cities seem to have been summoned. They're all moving toward Huaxia base. We weren't sure about that at first. We spent 2 days observing them before we confirmed it. Xiao Liqing nodded and said affirmatively. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face disappeared. His eyes sparkled as he said, If that's true, Huaxia base is in big trouble. Does it have anything to do with the zombie emperor? I think so, said Xiao Liqing. The closer the zombie emperor is to Huaxia base, the larger and larger the zombie army will be. The zombie army has never stopped. Chapter 764. Wu Qingyue fell silent, and after a while he said, It seems like there are some problems with the zombie emperor. Xiao Liqing looked at him. Then should we still go to China? If that was really the case, then the zombie emperor might really become a threat to humanity, just like what China had said before. If they underestimated the zombie emperor, then China's base would be in danger. They couldn't let the number of survivor bases decrease. Suddenly thinking of something, Wu Qingyue turned his feet, turned around, and walked back. Perhaps she has more information than you, he said. Xiao Liqing followed Wu Qingyue back to Lin Xiao's office and smiled at Xin Yuzhen and Duan Wan. There's one more thing I forgot to ask your leader. Sorry for the trouble. Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen looked at each other, then looked at Wu Qingyue strangely before knocking on the door. Come in, Lin Xiao said. Duan Wan opened the door, and let Wu Qingyue in. Xiao Liqing looked at them and stood next to Duan. Your leader is really hard to deal with. Suddenly, Duan looked straight ahead and said quietly. Xiao Liqing was silent for a while, then replied softly, "It's business this time." Duan looked at him and didn't say anything. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue, who had returned. He didn't say anything and just stared at him silently. There's something that I think you should know. Mo Yan's current situation was that he had already destroyed a black dragon base. Next would be China. How confident do you think he is? Wu Qingyue walked to the window beside her desk. As he spoke, he glanced out the window. Then he leaned against the window and looked at Lin Xiao. He's a zombie emperor, much stronger than me. He can still control millions of zombies, and a normal summon is enough. As for how confident he is, it's hard to say. China's defense is like iron, and they have so many cannons. It's not like they're weak. Lin Xiao twirled the pen in his hand and said, "That's true, but if they really face millions of zombies, even the cannons will run out one day. If even Huaxia is breached, then will the Meng clan be next?" Wu Qingyue said, "If China couldn't hold out, then it wouldn't just be the Mongolians, but Sea City and Skyfire Base." He was afraid that it wouldn't be long before he would also fall into this kind of threat. Lin Xiao looked at him and suddenly said, "What? Have you changed your mind again? Are you going to Huaxia to help? Don't you think there's something wrong with this zombie emperor?" Wu Qingyue just asked. He did not deny or admit that Lin Xiao was going to Huaxia to help. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "So what? This has nothing to do with me. If Huaxia's Meng clan's Heaven Fire's 3 bases are destroyed, do you think Haiqing and this place will be able to escape his clutches?" Wu Qingyue said, "I don't have the obligation to save the entire human race, but if Mo Yin dares to come here again, I will kill him. I won't let him succeed either." Lin Xiao said, "From what you've said, Mo Yin seems to be very confident. You seem to have seen the destruction of those bases." Wu Qingyue looked at her expression and guessed. He could tell from her words that she knew about Mo Yan's situation. It looked like the Chinese base was going to be in a very bad spot. Who knows what will happen in the future? Judging from the current situation, Mo Yan is going to make a big move, and we'll see if China can hold out. It's none of my business if they can't hold out. What if you can't bear it and want to go help, then go. Let's go as soon as possible, Lin Xiao said casually, then looked down at the work report in his hand. Wu Qingyue smiled faintly and shrugged. "That's none of my business. I don't have the obligation to save the entire human race. I'll just take care of Haiqing." With that, he turned and left with Wu Yueling. Duan and Xin Yuzhen watched him leave. After walking for a few meters, Wu Qingyue put away the smile on his face and ordered with a slight frown, "Keep an eye on the situation in China and Mo Yan's situation." "Understood." Xiao Liqing nodded. In the following days, Lin Xiao stayed in the base to deal with all kinds of matters. At the same time, he increased the strength of the zombies in the space. At the same time, he took care of the cultivation base and the human base. Although it had always been Yuan Tianqing who did it, he was also very busy with all the big and small things. Moreover, ever since Qiao Lin rejected him, Yuan Tianqing wanted to kill himself at work. Lin Wenwen often watched him from afar and didn't disturb him when he was working. However, he would always appear in the wee hours of the morning when Yuan Tianqing fell asleep on his desk and put a blanket over him. Then he would leave silently. The other departments in the base gave Lin Xiao the list of things they needed or lacked. After Lin Xiao reviewed it again, he picked out the urgent ones and asked Lin Feng to bring people to collect them. Lin Feng was also very busy and didn't have time to take care of his family. Usually, he would be gone for 10 days to half a month. Qiu Lily and Elmar were also sent out by Lin Xiao to take some level 1st kings to collect energy cores. The 2 of them each took a direction, and each of them brought 3 level 1 kings out. After Gao Haoyun joined, China's situation did not receive any help from the other bases. It was completely relying on China's own manpower and resources to support the endless zombie horde. The zombie corpses outside the wall were burned to ashes by the fire metahumans, but it did not stop the zombie horde from rushing up. At the beginning, China displayed its powerful military strength. The firepower and ammunition were very powerful, And before the zombie horde could reach the vacuum zone outside the wall, they would be eliminated by wave after wave of long-range attacks. However, this situation started to weaken after 10 days to half a month. When the zombie horde reached the vacuum zone, it was time for all kinds of machine guns and group abilities to be used. Lin Xiao was still leisurely building his base. The human base's wall was already 95% complete, and after this one was finished, he could continue building the wall of the other zombie base. With the addition of a new group of people, the construction progress was pushed even faster. The other bases were all paying attention to China's situation. Apart from Lin Xiao, the other leaders felt a sense of crisis as China's situation declined. Especially the Ming tribe that was closer to China. Some people had already started to flee the base. At this time, a certain level 2 king in Lin Xiao's space, after observing Lin Xiao for a long time, finally, he decided to say something that was bothering him. Chapter 765. Huh? You have a sister? Why did you only say it now? Lin Xiao sat on the sofa in the living room of the space and looked at Lin Kuei in surprise. Lin Kuei, who was sitting on the sofa on the other side, just looked at her silently. Lin Xiao thought for a moment and immediately understood. He said, "Oh, okay. You didn't believe me before? Or are you worried that if you know you have a sister, she will take her away and control you? Well, you are not familiar with me after all. It is normal to be cautious." Lin Kuei had indeed been cautious of her. Although he was grateful that this female zombie saved him from China, he could not completely trust her. He had a family member. It was a secret in his heart. He did not dare to say it because he was afraid that others would hurt his family member because of him. That person was his sister, who was 3 years older than him. After observing for a while, Lin Kuei found that Lin Xiao was indeed a good female zombie. Although she was not very kind, she had a bottom line and principles. Especially this time, he saw that Lin Xiao had healed a large number of zombies' throats, including his. He had always been curious. This female zombie had a space attribute and could swallow fire attribute. It was already very rare. How could she have such a powerful healing attribute? It did not matter if it was a human or a corpse. It could be healed. It was like cheating. Before being caught, my sister had been living alone in China. I could only sneak into China to visit her. Later on, when I accidentally came out, I was found by the people in China, so I was caught. Lin Kuei said with a hoarse voice. Then does your sister know about your situation? Lin Xiao looked at him and asked. No, she thought I was dead the day I became a zombie. Lin Kuei slightly closed his eyes. His hoarse voice seemed to be more depressed. Lin Xiao looked at him now. He was actually very young. He was about 21 or 22 years old, but his temperament was much older. However, his temperament had aged a lot. Only his appearance had stopped at the time of his death. Did you become a zombie on the day of the apocalypse? The first batch? Lin Xiao looked at him and asked. Lin Kuei nodded. Then is your sister still in China? Lin Xiao's eyes suddenly flashed. He thought of the current situation in Huaxia. I don't know either. After I was captured, I lost contact with my sister. The biggest possibility is that she's still in the Huaxia base. Lin Kuei looked up at her, and a trace of confusion and panic flashed across his dark cat-like eyes. Fortunately, you said it now. Do you know the current situation in China? Lin Xiao sighed and looked at him. Mo Yan's situation is getting dangerous. Not long ago, he led the zombie wave to destroy the Black Dragon base in the northeast. Now he's besieging the base in China. Although the Huaxia base had once sent reinforcements to our major bases, no one was willing to help until the last moment. Lin Kuei was shocked when he heard the news. He widened his eyes and looked at Lin Xiao. What? Mo Yan brought the zombies to attack China's base? When did that happen? Why did he attack the Huaxia base? He also knew who Mo Yan was talking about. It was the zombie emperor from last time. Who would have thought that the zombie emperor would actually wipe out the entire Black Dragon base, and now it was attacking the #1 base in the country? He knew how powerful the zombie emperor was. At least when it came to summoning zombies, it could summon endless numbers. No matter how strong the defense of China was, and how many weapons they had, they would run out one day. When that time comes, the Huaxia base would be in danger. If the Huaxia base was in danger, his sister would be in danger too. He's just taking revenge. Most of the people in the Black Dragon base owe him. Gao Haoyun is also one of Mo Yan's enemies. Therefore, after he ran away to seek refuge in the Huaxia base, he lured Mo Yan over. Also, Mo Yan's situation doesn't seem right. I just don't know what a level 8 zombie emperor will do when it loses control. Lin Xiao's expression darkened. When a level 8 lightning zombie emperor loses control, the destructive power of the violent lightning strike would be unimaginable. Lin Xiao thought of it, and Lin Ke, of course, thought of it too. He was at a loss. No, I need to find my sister now. Ms. Lu, please let me out. In his panic, Lin Ke did not notice that his leopard ears and tail were exposed. His tail was wagging vigorously, and he seemed very uneasy. You won't be able to enter the Huaxia base like this. Lin Xiao looked at him and reminded him. Then she continued, now that the Huaxia base is surrounded by countless zombies, it's not that easy to sneak in. Lin Kuei looked at Lin Xiao blankly, and his eyes flashed anxiously. Then what should we do? Don't worry. If you want to go in, I can directly represent the Huaxia base and take a helicopter. Lin Xiao comforted him. Of course, she didn't have a helicopter here. If she wanted to use it, she would have to borrow it from someone. As for who to borrow it from, well, that person was also in her base now, wasn't he? Although she really didn't want to have too much contact with that person, it was inevitable that there would be some interaction between leaders. Wu Qinghua shamelessly stayed in her base. Occasionally, Xiao Yunlong would come to catch him and take him back to Haiqing for a few days. Then Lin Xiao would feel relieved, but before she could recover, Wu Qinghua would come from Haiqing again. And now, almost the whole world knew that Wu Qinghua was pursuing her. Are you going too? Lin Kuei looked at her with some surprise. He thought that he could go alone. Yes. Lin Xiao nodded. During this period of time, Mo Yan's situation was getting more and more dangerous. After thinking about it, she decided to go and see Mo Yan's situation in person. If possible, she wanted to see which direction he would go. If it went in a bad direction, then for the future stability of the Huaxia base, Lin Xiao would still take action. She could ignore the life and death of the people in the Black Dragon base, Huaxia base, and other bases, but she couldn't let a factor that could threaten her base continue to grow. So after thinking for so many days, Lin Xiao changed her mind again. She decided to personally take a group of experts to Huaxia base to see the situation. Then when are we leaving? Lin Kuei looked at Lin Xiao with joy. With her going, things would naturally be much easier than if he went alone. Lin Xiao said, I'm going out to prepare now. You can stay here. It won't take long. After saying that, she stood up and disappeared in a flash. After coming out of the space, Lin Xiao immediately called Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen in and asked them to call Yuan Tianxing and other senior managers for a meeting. Then she arranged the work after she left in an orderly manner. Yuan Tianxing, Qin Yuding, and the others had already been informed. So it wasn't surprising that Lin Xiao wanted to leave for Huaxia. Chapter 766. But at this moment, Lin Xiaolu and Tong Tong disappeared. When Lin Xiao went to pick up Duan Wan, he also brought back a group of children. These children often played with Lin Xiaolu and Tong Tong. But today, when they were playing on the school field, Tong Tong disappeared. At that time, a group of children panicked and looked everywhere. But then Lin Xiaolu also disappeared. So everyone immediately ran to report. At this time, Lin Feng and Lin Wenwen went out to collect supplies. Only Mrs. Lin and Cheng Wangxue looked after the children. Now that the children were missing, she immediately asked people to look for them. She also sent people to inform Lin Xiao. Lu Jun wasn't in the base. She was working in the cultivation base of Wushan. When she was catching insects in the field, she saw a level 1 king zombie running from the base. It was the little boy zombie. He flashed behind Lu Jun and said, "Leader wants you to go back. Tong is missing." The little boy's voice was hoarse, like stones rubbing against each other, very harsh. But after he finished speaking, he completely expressed his meaning. "What? I see. Say it again." Lu Jun stood up and looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Because Lin Xiao gave them numbers, the little boy was number 4. so now the zombies called him Asi. Before they remembered who they were, they all called him this. Leader said, Tong Tong is missing. Asi looked up at her and said again. Lu Jun's expression darkened, and she flashed back to the base. Asi also flashed back, leaving the other zombies looking at each other. On the other side, when Lin Xiao arrived, everyone was already looking for Tong Tong and Lin Xiaolu in the school. Lin Xiao stood on the top of the school's tallest building, her eyes flashing fiercely. No one was faster than her at finding people. She raised her nose and sniffed, then flashed in a direction. Soon, Lin Xiao appeared in an abandoned old building a few kilometers away from the school. This small building was an old house, empty and full of dust and debris. Just then, someone from the school received news that a new space ability user had been seen in the vicinity of the children's playground today. He even secretly pointed at the group of children with a few people and discussed something. Later, he disappeared, and so did Tong Tong. A new space arcanist? The level 3 one? Yuan Tianqing looked at the others. There were 2 spatial ability users in this base, the leader and Lin Wenwen. Not long ago, the second batch of survivors from the Netherworld King's base had a new rank 3 space ability user. Bring him here, Yuan Tianqing immediately ordered. Not long after Lu Tong returned to his room, he heard someone knocking on the door. Lu Tong, someone's looking for you. It was the voice of the person who lived next door. Lu Tong opened the door and asked in confusion, Someone's looking for me? Who are you? The person outside casually pointed at the door, and Lu Tong turned his head to look. Seeing that it was 2 soldiers wearing the uniform of the base, an ominous premonition arose in his heart. Lu Tong didn't know what was going on. He closed the door and walked through the living room. When he reached the door, he asked the 2 men, Can I help you? You're Lu Tong? One of the 2 soldiers asked him. Lu Tong nodded. Then please come with us. There's something we need your help with, the other soldier said in a pleasant tone. Lu Tong looked at their posture and knew that he had to go with them today. Seeing that the other party's attitude was not bad, his eyes flashed before he nodded and walked out. On the other side, after Lin Xiao arrived at the building, he went into stealth mode and followed the smell that was getting closer. Not long after, he heard voices. Damn it, we've waited for so long for this day. Lu Tong bumped into those kids. I hope this time he'll be killed. This girl's father is the deputy leader. If he finds out that his daughter was killed by Lu Tong, he'll definitely hate him to death. That's right. We've waited for more than 20 days. But do you think we'll be exposed? What if they find out that it was the boss who ordered us to do it and frame Lu Tong? Maybe we'll be discovered before we can escape. Pay. Don't talk nonsense. Our plan is so thorough, they won't be able to find out so quickly. Even if Lu Tong refuses to admit it, the people in the base won't believe him. We'll kill him as soon as possible, then sneak out as if nothing happened. Then we'll go to Haiching for a while and wait for the boss to gain a foothold here before coming back. These people still wanted to come back in the future. Although they couldn't kill people in the base in this post-apocalyptic world, if they really killed someone, it would be fine after a few years, as long as the matter wasn't exposed. Come back? Do you want to die? Anyway, I won't be coming back. Unless the boss's power is greater than Lin Feng's in the future, the matter will be exposed one day. We'll all die. TCH, at most we'll just wait a few more years. What's there to be afraid of? The matter won't be exposed. The Lin family won't know that we did it. Besides, Lu Tong has already become a scapegoat. They definitely won't find out about us. While Lin Xiao was listening to their plan, Lu Tong was brought in front of Yuan Tianqing and the rest for questioning. You're called Lu Tong, right? I heard that you appeared nearby today. May I ask what you're doing here? The one who came out to ask questions was Du Yuanxing. He stared at Lu Tong's eyes and asked, Nearby? I'm just passing by. Is there a problem? Lu Tong looked at Du Yuanxing with a puzzled expression. Someone saw you discussing something with a few people nearby. May I ask what you were discussing with them here? Du Yuanxing asked again. What? Discussing something with a few people? No, I'm just passing by today. It's just me. Where did other people come from to discuss something? What's going on? You guys brought me here to ask some strange questions, but you didn't tell me what happened. How do you expect me to answer? Lu Tong looked at him with a puzzled expression. Tong Tong, where's my Tong Tong? Did you find him? Did you find Tong Tong? At this time, a figure rushed over and asked anxiously when he saw someone. Everyone looked and knew that this was Tong Tong's mother, because Lu Jun was wearing contact lenses. Although the color of his eyes was a bit strange, no one thought that he was a zombie. So now Lu Jun boldly appeared in the crowd of humans. Lu Jun, Tong Tong hasn't been found. My Xiao Lu is also missing. See if you can smell where they are. At this time, another person suddenly appeared and pulled Lu Jun to the side. He lowered his voice and said to her, it was Cheng Wangxue. Cheng Wangshue's eyes were also filled with panic. But she forced herself to calm down and looked at Lu Jun expectantly, because she knew Lu Jun's identity. Chapter 767. Lu Jun immediately jumped onto a tall tree next to him and sniffed the air around him. Soon, she could smell the scent of her son and Lin Xiaolu. Worried that the two children would be in danger, Lu Jun immediately rushed over there without saying a word. On the other side, Lin Xiao heard voices and walked over to take a look. The location was indeed a bit secluded. It was not easy to be discovered, and it was so far away that there were very few people around. The two children were tied to a pillar with their hands and feet tied, and their mouths sealed. Tong Tong's eyes were red from fear, and tears were flowing nonstop. On the other hand, Lin Xiaolu was very calm. Her pair of big black eyes stared coldly at the men around her. Little girl, you're still quite calm. You're not bad, but it's a pity that you're too young. Big brother has no interest in children. At this time, a man walked in front of Lin Xiaolu with a smile and stretched out his hand to touch her smooth and soft face. Lin Xiaolu turned her face away in disgust, avoiding his hand. Indeed, she'll definitely be a beauty when she grows up. What a pity. Looks like the beauty won't be able to grow up. Another man leaned against the wall, not far away, and laughed with a face full of pity. At this time, a man ran over from afar and said with a face full of joy, it's done, it's done. Lu Tong was brought over by Yuan Tianxing's men. This time, no matter how that kid tries to identify them, he won't be able to explain himself. Right? Boss's move is quite good. Daring to go against our boss, Lu Tong and Li Honglin will definitely be out of luck. The man guarding the two children sneered. These people thought that Chun Hao wanted to deal with Lu Tong because Lu Tong made a fool out of him, causing them and their boss to put out bait to lure the zombies. What they didn't know was that the reason Chun Hao wanted to kill Lu Tong was because he knew his secret. Lin Xiao leaned against the man who spoke and learned from his thoughts that the boss was a man called Chun Hao. He was also a metahuman among the survivors of the old Hell King's base. Moreover, Lin Xiao had heard of this name before when she sent Xie Dong to observe them. Lu Tong, Li Honglin, Chun Hao, and Wang Jian were all names that Xie Dong had mentioned. However, this Chun Hao actually dared to target her family and even wanted to kill the two children. This was simply courting death. Who gave you the guts to touch these two children? Suddenly, a cold voice rang out among the crowd. Who is it? Apart from the two children, everyone present was immediately startled. They stood up in an instant and entered a state of full alert. Almost all of them used their eyes to search their surroundings. A figure appeared beside the pillar where the two children were tied up. Lin Xiao looked at them coldly. Who are you? I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw him. After all, it was much easier for him to appear than to hide in the surroundings. Moreover, it was a woman. In front of these people, Lin Xiao calmly flicked his finger and a small wisp of black smoke floated out and slid through the ropes on the two children's hands and feet. The rope immediately fell off, and the two children quickly stood up. Lin Xiaolu tore off the tape in her mouth and pulled Tong Tong to hide behind Lin Xiao. Ka. Several men around him instantly took out their guns and aimed them at Lin Xiao. In the post-apocalyptic world, there were no restrictions on firearms and knives, so it was normal for everyone to carry a gun and knife with them. Lin Xiao waved his hand, and immediately a few figures appeared beside him. All of them wore camouflage military uniforms and wore sunglasses. They stood on either side of Lin Xiao in 2 rows. Capture them. Let one of them escape. I want them alive. Lin Xiao directly ordered, then calmly held the 2 children and turned around to leave. The ones who were released were Jing Yin, Ah Song, Chen Zhong, Pesticide, and 2 other level 5 zombie leaders. Seeing the sudden appearance of a group of people wearing sunglasses, Chen Hao's people were shocked and immediately raised their guns to shoot. Bang, bang, bang. However, when their bullets were fired, the 6 zombies released by Lin Xiao just flashed and disappeared in place. Then Chen Hao's people only saw a blur in front of their eyes and were fiercely attacked from behind. The guns in their hands were immediately shot down. They didn't even have time to release their abilities before they were knocked unconscious by the back of their heads. Jing Yin led the zombies to carry these people one by one and followed Lin Xiao's direction and directly jumped down from the gap in the building. At this time, a figure suddenly flashed. Tong Tong! Lu Jun rushed in front of Lin Xiao in a panic. Mom! When Tong Tong saw his mother, he immediately pounced on her excitedly. Tong Tong is fine. He's just a little scared. It wasn't Lin Xiao who spoke, but Lin Xiaolu who was next to her. It's good that you're fine. Xiaolu, how about you? Did they do anything to you? Lu Jun held the child and examined him. After discovering that there was no problem, he was completely relieved. He then looked at Lin Xiaolu with concern and asked. Lin Xiaolu looked up at Lin Xiao and said with a smile, "They didn't have time to make a move." Lin Xiao pointed at her head and said, "Fortunately, they didn't make a move in advance, otherwise you would be in danger. Why aren't you afraid?" Looking at the child's calm appearance, it seemed that she wasn't afraid of being hurt. "Because I can feel their thoughts. I know they won't kill me and Tong Tong so quickly. They won't make a move so quickly, which means they have time. If they have time, you can come and save us." Lin Xiaolu smiled a little proudly. "You're smart." Lin Xiao smiled and patted her head, then turned to look at Jing Yin and the others who were carrying an unconscious person, and said, "Okay, let's go back. It's not over yet." Then he waved his hand and released a car for Lu Jun and the 2 children to get in. He got in the driver's seat and started the car. Jing Yin and the other zombies outside the car were each carrying a criminal. Their bodies flashed and they jumped up to the roof towards the school in the center of the base. "What do you mean? I just passed by here to find someone to do something. I didn't do anything else." "Don't wrongly accuse a good person. I didn't do anything." Lu Tong was taken to a classroom in the school. All the tables in the classroom were cleared out, leaving only one on the podium. Lu Tong sat on a chair 3 meters away from the podium with 2 soldiers standing behind him. Du Yuanqing sat on the podium with his legs crossed and asked, "Since you said you came to find someone to do something, then who do you think you're looking for? What is it? If you don't say it, who knows if it's a good thing or a bad thing?" "What bad thing can I do? I just want to find someone to help me move to another room." "Can I move to another room? Is that a bad thing?" Lu Tong frowned and said with some grievance. Chapter 768. You want to change your residence? Why do you want to change? Do you think that ordinary people are not worthy of living with you metahumans? Du Yuanqing looked at him coldly. "I just don't want to live with Chen Hao." Lu Tong curled his lips and said, "Chen Hao? Oh, there's another rank 3 metahuman in your group. Didn't you guys come together? I thought you were worried about those ordinary people. After all, you guys don't get along with them." Du Yuanqing looked at him curiously and guessed. "That's because Chen Hao and I have some personal conflicts. He wants me dead more than Wang Jian and the others." Lu Tong lowered his eyes slightly. A sharp glint flashed in them. "All right, let's not talk about others first. Let's talk about you. However, someone said that after you came here, you were discussing something with the others. Not long after, they left, and then our deputy leader Lin's child and another very young child disappeared. We suspect that you were the one who took them away." Du Yuanqing directly expressed their suspicions. Lu Tong's expression froze for a moment. Then his eyes suddenly opened wide and said in shock, "Why would I take away 2 children? I have no grudges with Deputy Leader Lin. Why would I take away their children? Furthermore, I came here alone today and did not come with anyone else. I didn't discuss anything with anyone. The people around him observed his expression and eyes. His expression was very natural. There did not seem to be any signs of falsehood. Is that so? Then it seems that someone is trying to frame you. Du Yunqing looked at him with a cold expression, sitting there without moving, and continued, "No matter. Once we find the two children, the truth will come to light. Once we find them, the truth will come to light." Not long after, someone ran over to report to Du Yunqing. "The children have been found." Du Yunqing immediately changed his calm demeanor and stood up from his chair. He asked nervously, "Are the children? Are they all right?" The soldier who came to report shook his head and said, "The children are fine. The kidnappers have also been caught." "Who?" Lu Tong and Du Yunqing both asked at the same time. Hearing Lu Tong's voice, Du Yunqing turned to look at him. He saw that his face was filled with confusion and anger. From the moment he came here to be questioned, he knew that he had fallen into a trap. Although he guessed that it might be that person who did it, he would not say it for the time being without conclusive evidence. Now he heard that the child had been found and the kidnappers had been caught. He immediately wanted to know if this was really Chen Hao's doing. The soldier said, "The kidnappers have been locked up, but the mastermind behind the scenes has not been caught. This matter has nothing to do with Lu Tong." As he spoke, he looked at Lu Tong, who had already stood up from his chair. It meant that he could let them go. However, Lu Tong didn't leave. He rushed over and asked, "Is it Chen Hao?" The soldier glanced at him, but did not say anything. Du Yunqing said to Lu Tong, "All right, since it has nothing to do with you, you can go back first." As he spoke, he looked at the two soldiers behind Lu Tong. The two soldiers received the look and immediately led Lu Tong out. "Let's go." Seeing that the person had left, Du Yunqing immediately revealed his true nature and asked with some excitement, "Who found the child? So fast. Who's the mastermind?" "Yes, leader." Furthermore, the leader said that the mastermind behind all of this was that Chen Hao, a level 3 ability user. Leader has already sent Captain Duan to capture him. Lu Tong's guess is correct. Lu Hao wanted to take care of him, but he didn't dare to do it himself. That's why he turned his attention to Vice Leader Lin. The soldier only revealed the truth after Lu Tong left. As Du Yunqing walked out, he asked, "Where are the captured people being held?" "In the interrogation room." On the other side, Chen Hao was sitting in the living room of the dormitory, waiting for someone to bring him in for questioning. Seeing that Lu Tong was taken away by those people, Lu Tong would definitely suspect him, and then he would tell the people at the base his name. After that, the people at the base would also send someone to bring him in for questioning, and at that time, he could pretend that he knew nothing. The people at the base did not have any evidence and could not do anything to him just by listening to one side of the story. When the body of the child was found, Lin Feng might still be able to force himself to calm down, but Cheng Wangxue might not be able to do so. With Cheng Wangshue's violent temper, he would not be able to calm down unless he killed Lu Tong. In the end, after waiting for a long time, the people at the base did not return, but Lu Tong came back unscathed. Chen Hao's expression froze, but he quickly returned to normal. He smiled and said, "Yo, where did you go? I heard that you were taken away by the soldiers." Lu Tong did not expect to see the person he suspected just now when he returned home. After a moment of shock, his expression immediately turned cold. He did not say anything, but went straight back to his room and closed the door. Because there was no way to find someone to switch rooms with, Lu Tong could only take out some benefits and switch rooms with the people in the other two rooms. At least he would not be sleeping in the same room as Chen Hao. After entering the room and closing the door, he immediately leaned against the door and listened to the movements in the living room. This bastard actually dared to swagger here. Did he think that no one knew what he had done? Humph, you better sit down. From the looks of it, you still don't know that the matter with the child has been exposed and that the child is fine. But you will be in trouble soon, Lu Tong thought with a cold smile. Lu Hao was surprised that Lu Tong could come back, and when he saw him go in, his face immediately darkened. He did not think that his men would make a mistake, but he felt that Lu Tong might have said something to get the people from the base to let him go. Could it be that because Lin Feng was not here, Yuan Tianqing did not care about this matter? Just as he was thinking about the reason, there was another knock on the door. Lu Hao turned his head to look in the direction of the door, but did not immediately get up to open it. Then, there was a second knock on the door. Only then did he stand up, walk to the door, and hesitated for a moment before opening it. There were 5 or 6 people standing outside the door, and standing at the very front was a woman. She looked ordinary, with long hair tied into a ponytail behind her head, and was about 1.7 meters tall. Behind her stood 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman, all wearing the same military uniform of the base. They also had guns in their hands. The woman looked at him expressionlessly, then said, "You must be Chun Hao. Please come with us." Chun Hao looked at the woman blankly, then asked, "Who are you people?" Then he suddenly thought of something, and his eyes flashed as he took a step back and said, "Oh, I'm not Chun Hao. Chun Hao is not home. He went out. If you're looking for him, come back tomorrow." Saying so, he wanted to close the door, but the woman outside the door suddenly reached out and blocked the door. Without another word, Chun Hao turned around and instantly rushed toward the window of the living room. From the looks of it, he was ready to break out of the window and escape. At this time, Lu Tong also rushed out of the room, pointing at Chun Hao and shouting, "He's Chun Hao, don't let him get away." Chapter 769. Chun Hao wanted to rush towards the client, but someone reacted faster than him. The glass on the window was suddenly blocked by a wall. Bang dash, Chun Hao slammed into the wall but didn't go out. Instead, he was pushed back by the wall's hardness and almost fell to the ground. Before he could get up, he was wrapped into a ball by the mud wall that gushed out from the wall, leaving only his head sticking out. "Want to run? You have to see if I agree," Duan Wan said coldly, then turned to Ding Datong and said, "Take him away." "Wait a minute. I have a piece of information that you should be interested in," Lu Tong suddenly called out to Duan Wan with a cold expression. On the other side, Lin Xiao sent Lin Xiaolu to Cheng Wangxue and said, "All right, Xiaolu is fine. Don't worry." Like Lu Jun, she checked Lin Xiaolu's body up and down, and was completely relieved after seeing that she was fine. She said angrily, "Who is it?" Lin Xiao said, "Go to the interrogation room, and you'll know." She didn't plan to go there. Since the child was saved, then the rest would be handled by the people below. She had other things to do, and would be leaving in 2 days. On the other side, Lu Tong was brought to the interrogation room, and Duan Wan threw him to Du Yuanxing for questioning. "Didn't I let you go? Why are you here again?" Du Yuanxing looked at her in surprise. "He has a piece of information, you can ask him." Duan Wan threw him down, then left. Du Yuanxing looked at Duan Wan's back, then turned back to look at Lu Tong strangely and said, "Sit down and talk." The interrogation room wasn't big, and it was reconstructed from a laboratory. There was a table in the middle of the room, and a chair was fixed 2 meters in front of the table. Usually, the person being interrogated would sit on this chair. Du Yuanxing and one of his subordinates pulled out the chair under the table and sat down, letting Lu Tong sit on the chair in front. Lu Tong sat down and said, "Deputy Leader Lin's lover, Madame Lin, was kidnapped in the year of the apocalypse. That kidnapper was actually Chun Hao. Madame Lin didn't seem to recognize him at the time, and he escaped. This was Chun Hao's secret, but I accidentally found out. That's why he's been trying to kill me in secret to silence me." Du Yuanxing looked at him with slight surprise. "Is what you said true?" Lu Tong nodded and said, "At that time, he seemed to want to force himself on Madame, but something unexpected happened, so he didn't succeed." Of course, Du Yuanxing knew what he meant when he said force. Cheng Wangxue was pretty to begin with, and it was normal for the kidnappers to be lustful when she was kidnapped. Hearing this, Du Yuanxing asked him with a sullen face, "Do you have any evidence?" Lu Tong shook his head and said, "He said it himself. I didn't record it, so I don't have any evidence. But you can also find evidence, and you can also confront Madame Lin. Anyway, I have said what I should say." Du Yuanxing looked at him in silence for a few seconds. He took the statement written by his subordinate and looked at it. Then he stood up and walked out. On the other side, The 6 kidnappers brought back by Lin Xiao were being interrogated one by one, but they stubbornly refused to say anything. It was the same for Chen Hao. After being captured, he had remained silent. He didn't say anything when asked. The 6 people he sent to do this were all his loyal subordinates. They definitely wouldn't expose him. Even if these people told him that they were the ones who exposed him, he wouldn't believe them. These people couldn't produce any evidence, and without evidence, they wouldn't dare to touch him. He won't say anything? Duan Wan looked at Chen Hao in front of the glass outside the interrogation room. Li Hongsheng, who was beside her, shook his head and said, "He hasn't said anything." "Why does the leader think it's him?" "The leader must know something," Duan Wan said. At this time, Cheng Wanshua also came over. She stared coldly at Chen Hao and said in a gloomy voice, "Is he the mastermind?" Duan Wan looked at her and said, "The leader said it's him, but we haven't gotten anything out of him. He also won't admit it, and the people brought back by the leader aren't saying anything either. We have no evidence to confirm whether it's him or not." "I believe the leader." Cheng Wanshua took a step forward and stared at Chen Hao. Then she asked with some confusion, "But why did he kidnap Xiao Lu and Tong Tong?" "It's not as simple as kidnapping. They plan to kill the hostages. The goal is actually to kill someone else," Duan Wan said. "What do you mean? Why drag my child into the water to kill someone else?" Cheng Wanshua turned around and asked angrily. "It's like this. This Chen Hao probably wanted to borrow someone else's hand to kill a spatial ability user called Lu Tong. He wanted to push the death of Xiao Lu and her children onto Lu Tong and frame him. As for why he would make a move on Xiao Lu, it might be because children are easy targets, and also because of Lin Feng's current status and identity." Duan Wan said the first part of what she said was the truth, but the second part was speculation. How dare he? How dare he come up with such a sinister plot and drag 2 innocent children into it? Scum! When Cheng Wanshua thought of her child and 4-year-old Tong Tong almost dying because of this man's plot, she immediately gritted her teeth and wanted to rush in and kill this man. She believed that Lin Xiao wouldn't be wrong. If he said it was this person, then it must be this person. At this time, Du Yuanqing walked in with some people. Come, the information on Lu Tong is here." Big sis Cheng, you're here. This matter is related to you?" The moment he walked in, he handed over the information in his hand and immediately said when he saw Cheng Wanshua, "Related to me?" Cheng Wanshua looked at him blankly. Du Yuanqing directly handed over the records in his hand to her and asked, "Do you remember that you were kidnapped in the year of the apocalypse?" "It was once. How did you know?" Cheng Wanshua took the records and was stunned for 2 seconds when she heard what he said. Then her eyes darkened as she looked at him and asked. Du Yuanqing pointed at the records in her hand and said, "That person is called Lu Tong. You can read it yourself. Moreover, this Chen Hao probably wanted to kill Lu Tong because of this matter. Because once you enter this base, your entire family will be here. What if Lu Tong reveals this matter to others one day? If Lu Tong reveals this matter one day, he will be out of luck." Cheng Wanshua looked at him suspiciously, then lowered her eyes to look at the records in her hand. As she looked, her expression changed. Anger, vengeance. Her hands trembled slightly, and her expression was twisted. Cheng Wanshua closed her eyes tightly and clenched her fists, forcing herself to calm down. Although Lu Tong said that, "We currently have no evidence to prove that what he said is true," Du Yuanqing suddenly said. In other words, there was no evidence to prove that this Chen Hao was the kidnapper who wanted to violate her 5 years ago. "Let me in." Cheng Wanshua suddenly opened her eyes. Her doll-like face was as cold as an iceberg. Chapter 770. Chen Hao, who had been silent all this time, sat quietly in the interrogation room. The interrogator also sat quietly with him. Suddenly, the door opened. Chen Hao and the interrogator turned to see Cheng Wanshua walk in with a frosty expression. "Captain Cheng." The interrogator stood up and nodded to Cheng Wanshua in greeting. Although Cheng Wanshua was a strength-type ability user, she was still a 5th-level ability user. There were many things to do in the base, so she and Du Yuanqing were in charge of the base's daily necessities. She was mainly in charge of the catering. The potatoes, pumpkins, and sweet potatoes that Lu Jun brought back from Wushan were all given to her to handle. Cheng Wanshua walked in front of Chun Hao and looked at him coldly. "Do you know me?" Chun Hao's eyes flashed when he saw her come in. But then he pretended to be confused and asked, "Who are you?" Cheng Wanshua didn't care about his answer and took a step back. Then she turned to the interrogator and said, "Take off his shirt and show me his left shoulder." "What is Captain Cheng doing?" Duan Wan and the others watched the situation from outside and asked curiously. The interrogator was a young man in his 20s. When he heard Cheng Wangshue's request, he nodded and immediately went to pull off Chun Hao's clothes. Chun Hao's expression changed when she said she was going to take off his clothes. He resisted agitatedly. "What are you doing? Why are you going to take off my clothes? Are you going to use torture to extort a confession? Don't move. Sit still." The interrogator saw that Chun Hao had been sitting obediently a moment ago, but now he had such a big reaction when he heard she was going to take off his clothes. He shouted. Chun Hao was fixed to the chair, and the chair was fixed to the ground. Although his ability was at the 3rd level, it was an Earth-type ability that didn't have much attack power. Seeing that the young interrogator was going to forcefully pull off his clothes, Chun Hao immediately moved his fingers and used his ability. Bang! Cheng Wangshue jumped up and kicked the earth cone that had just emerged from the wall. She stared at him coldly and said, "What are you afraid of if you don't know me? Do you have some secret behind your back?" Seeing that a fight was about to break out, the people outside immediately rushed in. "Get out of my way." Du Yuanqing walked directly behind Chun Hao and poked him in the back with his finger. Zing! A burst of electricity ran through Chun Hao's body. "Ah!" Chun Hao let out a cry as his entire body went limp. Then he fell forward. At this moment, the interrogator immediately tore open his clothes, and sure enough, there were a few faint marks on his left shoulder. Cheng Wangshua walked over to take a look, and his entire body shook. His eyes immediately flashed with intense hatred and killing intent. It was this person who had harmed her in the past, and now he had come to harm her daughter. It's him. He's the kidnapper from a few years ago. Cheng Wangshue took a few deep breaths before clenching her teeth and suppressing the fluctuating emotions in her heart. The others were slightly startled, and then they were overjoyed. On the other side, after Lin Xiao finished arranging things, he took Duan Wan's group and Xin Yuzhen, Lin Ke, Lu Tianyi, Jing Yin, and the other zombies out of the base and headed towards Haicheng. In Haicheng, Wu Qingyue sat in his study and asked Xiao Liqing with a strange expression. Didn't she always stay out of it? Why did he suddenly want to go there by himself? What does she want to do? Watch the show? As for the leader of the base, Miss Lu originally planned to ignore her, but now she suddenly changed her mind and wanted to go there at this critical moment. It can't be that she's going to watch the show from afar, right? Xiao Liqing shook his head. I don't know what Leader Lu is thinking. Maybe it's because Mo Yan's situation is getting worse. At least I don't think she's going for China. Wu Qingyue thought about it and nodded. I think so too. I don't know what's going on with Mo Yan right now. No one can get too close to him. So there's very little information about him. But looking at China's current situation, I'm afraid it'll start to collapse in another month. The energy of a human is limited, not to mention the energy of a psychic. Using it continuously like this, the recovery is very slow, and the number of zombies doesn't decrease at all. So this isn't a long-term solution. Wu Qingyue sighed and said, since she wants to go, then I'll go and have a look as well. When Xiao Liqing heard this, he looked at him strangely and couldn't help but say, Boss, you can't keep pestering her like this. She'll hate you more and more. It'll have the opposite effect, you know? From the Spring Festival until now, his leader has been running to the base whenever he has something to do. That way, the people from both bases basically knew that he was chasing the female leader of the new base. This made most of the people in Haicheng very curious about the female leader. In the end, running to the base was useless. The female leader would avoid him as soon as she saw him. She would only appear when she had work to do, so this person often ran to her office to sit. He couldn't even chase her away. In the end, he even moved the leader's work in Haicheng to her office to handle. Xiao Liqing knew that Wu Qingyue had some strange hidden characteristics, but he used to hide it very well. Ever since he met the female zombie leader, he gradually revealed it. Then if I don't take the initiative to find her, am I supposed to wait for her to find me? I'm the one chasing her, not the other way around. Since ancient times, women have been afraid of pestering men. As long as I persevere, she will accept me one day. Wu Qingyue was at his wit's end when he thought of this. There was no other way. That female zombie's defense was too tight. He had worked hard for so long, but he still didn't have any chance. In the past, it was still useful to push Lingling out, but now she was immune to Lingling. As for her belly, it had already been 5 or 6 months, but it was still flat and unnoticeable. After being in contact for such a long time, he could also see the current Lu Tianyu's personality. Neither soft nor hard. Although he really wanted to force her to marry him directly, using the child as a reason was enough. After all, this was also his child, and he had this right and responsibility. It didn't matter if her identity was a zombie, or if the child would be a zombie, a human, or some monster in the future. He wouldn't despise it at all. But he was afraid that if he was too tough, the other party would be tougher than him. After all, she was also someone who could become a leader, and not an ordinary woman. There wouldn't be a good result if he went head-on. A melon that was forcefully twisted wasn't sweet, so couldn't he wait for the melon to ripen and sweet before twisting it? Of course, this nourishment was still added by him, and he had to keep a close eye on this melon. Otherwise, if it was accidentally picked by someone else, wouldn't he cry? Thinking about the child calling someone else daddy in the future, Wu Qingyue's heart turned cold. Besides, I didn't force her. I think I've already done quite well on this point, Wu Qingyue said with a confident smile. Chapter 771. When Lin Xiao arrived at Haiqing with her self-defense forces, Wu Qingyue had already prepared a helicopter for her. I remember I only borrowed one. Why did you prepare so many? Xiao Lin looked at the 3-armed transport helicopters strangely. Then a thought flashed in her mind. And she turned to look at Wu Qingyue and sneered. No way. You're going too? Didn't you say you weren't going? You said you weren't obligated to save all of humanity. Wu Qingyue choked. Then he smiled at Lin Xiao and said, that was before. The situation is different now. Because you want to go. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said, you're really annoying like this. If you want to go, then go, but can you not let me know? When I see you showing off like that, I feel very uncomfortable. This man really didn't know what it meant to give up. After being pestered by him for so long, Lin Xiao's patience was running out. If it wasn't for the fact that the two bases were cooperating, she really would have beaten him up. Why? If I don't let you know, how will you know how I feel about you? Wu Qingyue said to her with a smile. The group of people behind him were already used to this. After all, the leader of Haiqing had been chasing after the leader of Universal Life Base for almost 2 months, but there was no effect at all. It was already the end of March, and the temperature was gradually rising. She could wear one less piece of clothing. So what if I know? I won't accept you. You're not tired, but I am. Besides, I borrowed the helicopter from you. I didn't take advantage of you, Lin Xiao said coldly and walked directly to one of the helicopters. Duanwan brought Ding Datong, Li Hongsheng, and the others, as well as Xin Yuzhen who was beside Lin Xiao, over. Universal Life Base didn't have a pilot, so when Wu Qingyue prepared the helicopter for them, he also provided a pilot. Behind Wu Qingyue were still Xiao Liqing, Mo Li, and Huang Ming. Looking at the backs of Lin Xiao and the others walking towards the helicopter, Xiao Liqing said with a hint of schadenfreude, see, I told you that this won't work. It will only backfire. Wu Qingyue turned around and looked at him with a smile. Then, do you have a better idea? Although Wu Qingyue was a little displeased to be ridiculed by his subordinate, he was slightly surprised by Lin Xiao's words. He didn't expect that everything he did was just showing off in her eyes. Wu Qingyue's mood became slightly downcast. In my opinion, with her strong personality, she definitely doesn't like being restricted. In her eyes, everything that the leader did seemed to be showing off on the surface. But deep down, she felt that she would be affected or restricted by the leader. That's why I'm getting more and more disgusted with your methods. Fortunately, leader, you didn't use forceful methods to chase after her. That's smart of you. At this moment, Emily suddenly said with a straight face. They watched as their leader chased after him for so long without any results. Instead, their relationship became more and more strange. She continued, if it weren't for the fact that our base is cooperating with her subordinate's base, I think you would have been beaten up by her a long time ago. Beat me? Why? Wu Qingyue looked at her in confusion. He didn't do anything to hurt her or disturb her. Emily glanced at him indifferently. Even if it was her own leader, she still had an indifferent expression on her face. Because the way you're pestering me is like a fly. If it were me, I would also hit him until he stopped pestering me. In my opinion, Miss Lu's patience is too good. Wu Qingyue, who was compared to a fly by his subordinate. Xiao Liqing, who was watching his boss being compared to a fly by his colleagues. Big Sister Mo, aren't you afraid of making the leader angry? How dare you say that? Wu Qingyue looked at Lin Xiao's back in silence for a long time. In the end, he suddenly sighed, feeling very down. Is this really not okay? Or are the two of them really not fated to be together? On the other side, Duan Wan, who was preparing to board the plane behind Lin Xiao, said, this leader Wu is really reluctant to let go. He knows your identity, but he doesn't care about this. I don't know how long he can last like this. She could see that although leader Wu was always smiling, his smile usually didn't reach those crescent moon eyes. Only when he saw her boss would there be stars in his eyes. It just wasn't obvious. Even if it wasn't a very strong feeling, it couldn't be said that there were no feelings in it. There was still some sincerity in it. But Duan Wan also knew that leader Wu's method definitely wouldn't be able to get her. Their boss wasn't a slow person when it came to feelings. She also knew how she felt about Deputy Captain Yuan. Because she didn't want to ruin the relationship between the two of them, she had always pretended not to notice. But this Wu Qingyue, their boss, had obviously rejected him countless times, but he didn't take it to heart every time. Although he didn't seem tired, she didn't know how long he could last. Don't mention him. Just thinking about him makes me sick. I don't know if there's something wrong with his brain. He actually came to propose? What the hell is that? Do you really think he likes me? I think it's just for Ling Ling's treatment. If he told me directly, I would definitely help him cure Ling Ling unconditionally, and it would be fine for many years. But there's no need to use this method. Do you think I don't understand anything? Lin Xiao heard Duan Wan mention this matter and felt a headache. Even if Wu Qingyue's ability level was high and his mental strength was too strong, she couldn't sense his thoughts. But she could stand in his perspective and consider the pros and cons of this matter. He cared about Ling Ling so much. Of course, he had long discovered that as long as Ling Ling was by his side, her emotions would be stable and her personality would be more cheerful. If she stayed by his side in the future, maybe one day the child's condition would be completely cured. Lin Xiao had no intention of harming Ling Ling. Although she didn't like children and couldn't do anything about them, she had already accepted Ling Ling in her heart. But since she had accepted Ling Ling in her heart, she also somewhat liked her. Wu Qingyue directly explained to her that for the sake of the child's condition, she could visit Ling Ling often, and she could also leave Ling Ling in the base. But what the hell was this proposal? What the hell was he talking about, giving little man in her stomach a healthy family? Why did he want her to be responsible for forcing him? That wasn't what she did. He also said that he had to be responsible for little man's future growth. He wanted her to marry him for these reasons? Her future life would be controlled by him, disturbed by him. Half of her space would be occupied by him. Forget it. Just thinking about it made her feel tired. Then what if he keeps pestering you like this? Maybe one day you'll be so annoyed that you'll go crazy and suddenly agree? Duan Wan looked at her, amused. Lin Xiao looked at her silently and didn't say anything. No matter how crazy she was, she wouldn't marry someone so easily. Chapter 772. Shen Yuzhen, who was sitting next to him, silently lit a candle for Wu Qingyue. Leader, your road to chasing your wife is very long. Lin Xiao turned her head and watched the plane slowly take off. The sound of the propeller and engine was too loud, and they all quieted down. She didn't know what Wu Qingyue was thinking, but what he did was definitely related to Lingling. Thinking about it, Lingling was also the key. After all, if it wasn't for her, she wouldn't have developed such a complicated relationship with Wu Qingyue. Although she was really tired of what Wu Qingyue was doing now, but she wouldn't really hate him from the bottom of her heart. Because other than bringing a lot of supplies as a gift that day, after she rejected it, he didn't forcefully send anything over. Perhaps the other party knew that she disliked this kind of approach. So in the end, he often appeared by her side and didn't leave. Lin Xiao thought that it would be great if she was reborn into someone else's body. Why did she have to be reborn into this Lu Tianyu, who was courting death? After the plane took off, it flew north. A few hours later, they soon arrived at the city where the Huaxia base was located. But looking down from the plane, there were zombies everywhere. Every highway, street, alley, and the open space between the buildings were filled with zombies. The number of zombies in front of them was no longer the number of people in a second-class city. This was obviously a group of zombies that were attracted from the surrounding cities. The closer they got to the Huaxia base, the denser the group of zombies became. Rumble, bang, rumble. In the distance ahead, they could see a location in the sky that was dark. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the low-pressure dark clouds, and there were constantly flashing purple lightning striking down. Although the shape of the falling lightning didn't look big, there were a lot of them, and they were very dense. Both Lin Xiao and Shen Yuzhen could feel a repressed and violent aura from that minefield. Lin Xiao was not unfamiliar with this aura. Go around that minefield and approach from the other side, Lin Xiao ordered. The helicopter that Lin Xiao and the others took bypassed the minefield, and Wu Qingyue and the others behind them also followed. There are 3 helicopters approaching from the west, their identities unknown. Leader, are the people from other bases coming over? Hou Guizhong, the deputy leader of Huaxia, walked to Xikong Chen's side and reported the helicopters to him. Let them in and see which base they are from. Xikong Chen stood in front of the big screen in the command room with his hands clasped behind his back. He raised his head slightly to look at the image on the screen. On the screen was the outer wall of the base. Countless zombies were piled up like a mountain and climbing up the wall. Many of them fell down halfway, but they quickly got up and continued to climb up. They were like frenzied beasts that didn't know fatigue, didn't know giving up, and wouldn't stop until they achieved their goal. From time to time, sparks would explode, and countless abilities would be used to attack the zombies. There were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and all kinds of abilities. These were all controlling long-range attacks, as well as the ability users on the top of the wall who were fighting in close combat, or those who were fighting with the zombies climbing up with swords and guns. The battle was very intense, and the zombies that could climb up were quickly eliminated. However, all of them were covered in blood and looked battered and exhausted. Everyone looked tired and dispirited. They had been fighting nonstop for a month without any time to rest. He had been nervously blocking the zombies outside from invading. However, there were too many zombies, and they were endless. They had been attacking for a month without any signs of retreating. Everyone was already very tired, but they still persisted in fighting. Beside the big screen, there were several small screens that showed the outside scene from different angles. There was a half-size screen that showed a minefield. There were also countless zombies in this minefield. The lightning that fell from the sky was random, and it hit whatever it saw. It seemed like there was no target, and there was no selectivity. Xikong Chen let the rank 7 water element ability Han Xiao go out to find out what was going on in the minefield. However, Han Xiao had been out for more than half a month, and there was still no information about the lightning. Moreover, this minefield, it could run. From time to time, it would appear on the east side for different periods of time, and from time to time, it would appear on the west side. It was like a living thing. After hearing Hou Guozhong's words, Xikong Chen didn't show any expression on his face. He just calmly let people in. However, Gao Haoyun, who was at the side, had a happy expression and asked nervously, "Are they reinforcements?" Hou Guozhong shook his head. Of course they are humans who can drive a helicopter here, but whether they are here to rescue us is still unclear. Maybe they are here to hit us when we are down. At this time, Hong Ijia suddenly pointed at the screen that showed the scene of the minefield and said, "Look, the minefield has disappeared. Just now, there was still lightning and thunder, and the ground was covered in smoke. Now, there was no trace of the lightning, and the dark clouds in the sky were quickly dissipating." Not long after, the helicopter flew high into the airspace of China's base. Then, under the instructions of China's ground, it landed on an open space. "So it's Leader Wu. I didn't expect you to come." Ho Guozhong stood at the edge of the open space, and after watching the helicopter land, he happily went forward to welcome him. He saw Wu Qingyue smiling, and another young beauty walked over side by side. Ho Guozhong's eyes flashed, and he secretly looked at the woman who had a calm smile on her face. She was 7 meters tall, and her figure was not bad. Her chest was plump, her waist was thin, and her legs were straight. Her steps were steady, and her aura was not weak. She was wearing a black military uniform and a military cloak, although the style was slightly different from Wu Qingyue's. But this kind of attire was the default dress of a leader after the apocalypse. Generally, people who were not leaders would not dress like this. This woman could walk side by side with Wu Qingyue, and she was wearing a leader's uniform. It seemed that she was also a leader-level figure. It was just that there seemed to be no female leaders in these major bases, and the only one was the female leader of the newly built Hangzhou base. Moreover, she came with Wu Qingyue, so it must be true, because Wu Qingyue was chasing the female leader of the new base. When the two of them approached with a group of men behind them, Ho Guozhong smiled again, looked at Lin Xiao, and stretched out his hand, saying, "This should be the leader of the All Beings base, Miss Liu. I have long heard of your name, and now that I see you in person, you are really a great beauty. I am the deputy leader of China's base, Ho Guozhong, and I am responsible for the affairs of our leader." Lin Xiao nodded to him with a faint smile. "Hello, my surname is Liu." Although she responded to the other party's greeting, she did not stretch out her hand to shake his. Ho Guozhong's eyes flashed, but his expression did not change, and he said with a faint smile, "So it is Miss Liu." Chapter 773. Although Lin Xiao responded with a smile, she did not return the other's hand. She was actually telling the other party that their statuses were not the same. Even if Ho Guozhong was a rank 7 metahuman, he was still a weakling in her eyes, not to mention that this person was only a vice leader. It was polite for her to respond, but if she were to extend her hand to return the handshake, it would be lowering her status. "Let's go and see your leader. Tell me about your situation." Wu Qingyue smiled and nodded at Ho Guozhong, but his feet did not stop moving forward. Ho Guozhong automatically moved aside and took a step back to follow beside the two of them. "The situation is not good. Our soldiers and metahumans have not rested for a month. The death toll is not high, but the number of injured is not small. The zombie tide has been attacking continuously. We do not know when they will retreat," Ho Guozhong said with a serious expression. "You should know the reason for the appearance of the zombie tide, right? Did you not think of any other way to solve the problem?" Wu Qingyue asked curiously. Everyone knew that the reason was within the zombies. For the zombie tide to be able to last for so long, it must have been ordered or controlled. If he didn't find out who was the one controlling the corpse tide wouldn't retreat. Our leader felt that the zombie tide is related to the moving thunderclouds, but the people we sent to investigate were unable to find any information about the minefield. Moreover, the people we sent out are all dead. Even one of our directors, with a rank 7 ability, has not returned yet, Ho Guozhong said with a sigh. Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue looked at each other. It seems like it has been a long time. China still has not found out that the zombie tide was caused by Mo Yin? How do you know that the zombie tide is related to the thunderclouds? Wu Qingyue asked curiously while walking. Ho Guozhong replied while leading the way, "Because when the thunderclouds appear, the zombie tide will change. The zombies will become crazy and attack fiercely. If the thunderclouds disappear, they will slow down a little, but they will not retreat. Just like now, the thunderclouds have just disappeared, the zombie tide should slow down a little." As he spoke, he entered the command building and walked for a while before arriving at the command room. Of course, only Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue could enter. The other two could only bring one subordinate with them. As soon as they entered the command room, everyone standing in front of the big screen turned around to look at them. "You're only here now? Leader Wu, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" Si Kong Chun, who had been expressionless all this while, casually said when he saw Wu Qingyue. The expression on his face didn't change, and his eyes were so deep that no one could tell what he was thinking. But when he saw Lin Xiao beside Wu Qingyue, his eyes flickered. When the others saw Lin Xiao, they were all stunned. Gao Haoyun, who was standing next to Si Kong Chun, looked at Lin Xiao with great interest. With an ambiguous smile, he said, "Yo, is this Leader Wu's girlfriend?" As soon as he said that, the others looked at Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue with dubious gazes. Lin Xiao smiled calmly, but when he looked at Gao Haoyun, a fierce look flashed across his eyes. There was no sound. Wu Qingyue slightly frowned and said with a faint smile, "Although I really wanted to introduce her to everyone, she didn't agree to it. But I think everyone already knows who she is, so I won't introduce her." When Gao Haoyun heard this, his eyes lit up. With a bright smile, he looked at Lin Xiao and said, "Oh, is that so? If that's the case, then everyone has a chance. Although you may know my name, let me introduce myself. My name is Gao Haoyun, Level 8 Arcanist, Ice Element." Originally, when he heard about this woman in the Black Dragon base, he didn't pay much attention. But now that he saw her, his thoughts changed. He didn't expect the female leader of this new base to be so young. She looked to be around 22 or 23 years old. She had a beautiful oval face, a pair of bright green eyes, a sharp nose, and pale but moist lips. Her straight black hair was straight to her waist, and 2 strands were scattered on both sides of her slender neck, casually hanging in front of her towering chest. Under the black military cloak was a slender waist and a pair of slender, straight, and smooth legs. Her calm temperament made her look cold and elegant, making people unable to move their eyes away. A beautiful face, a perfect body, and a cold temperament. Such a beautiful woman. Any man who saw her would want to tear off her solemn and proper military uniform and fiercely press her down to admire her beautiful face as she held back her tears. Especially in this post-apocalyptic world where women were lacking. Who wouldn't want such a beautiful woman who stood at the same height as them? Everyone present was a leader-level character. Even if they had any bad thoughts after seeing a beautiful woman, they wouldn't show it on their faces. It was just that each and every one of their hidden gazes allowed Lin Xiao to sense their mentality. Other than Wu Qingyue and Si Kong Chun, who Lin Xiao couldn't see through, Gao Haoyun's gaze was too obvious. The highest level of the others was only 7th level, so Lin Xiao only needed to look at them to know what they were thinking. A group of perverts. That's right, the original owner's body was indeed more fiery than Lin Xiao's. Moreover, her appearance was slightly more beautiful, and more importantly, she was younger. She knew that her current body's appearance would attract a lot of covetous eyes. Otherwise, the original owner wouldn't have been able to survive until now. She could even use the tiger's might to cause trouble in Sea City Base. That was why she was so low-key when she wasn't strong. But that didn't mean that now that she was out, she would become the target of these men. Lin Xiao smiled faintly, looking at Gao Haoyun without saying anything. Someone next to her spoke. "I didn't expect Leader Lu to be so young. We thought that a leader would at least be an old woman in her 30s like Nether Flame." One of China's directors, Hu Jiong, stared at her and said with a rippling smile. Lin Xiao, who was called an old woman at the age of 32, was speechless. Sigh. Although she's already in her 30s, her body is still maintained quite well. It's a pity that she was forced to death by Earth Dragon Base and Hidden Cloud City. In any case, she's still a beauty. Lu Jinan said with a face of pity. Wu Qingyue's expression became more and more indifferent as he listened. His crescent moon-like eyes gradually opened. There was a faint flash of cold light in them. These people unscrupulously stared at the female zombie with such an evil gaze. and even compared her to a dead person. This made Wu Qingyue's heart rise with a hint of anger. Chapter 774. Looks like you guys aren't worried about the zombies outside breaking through your defense line. You still have the mood to admire the beauty? Wu Qingyue stepped forward and blocked half of Lin Xiao's body behind him. He said to Lu Jinan and the others with a smile. It was obvious that he was mocking them for having such unscrupulous thoughts at this time. Although Wu Qingyue's face was smiling, his actions showed his strong desire to possess Lin Xiao. These people stared at Lin Xiao with greedy eyes, making him want to dig out their eyes. The anger in his heart was burning, but he did not show it on his face. Yes, Leader Wu is reluctant to let her go, but she did not agree with you. Everyone here has the right to chase after the beauty, right? Gao Haoyun stared at Lin Xiao's face and smiled. It seems like the Ice Demon leader does not care about the destruction of his base. Wu Qingyue smiled and looked at Gao Haoyun. Ice Demon was Gao Haoyun's title, just like Lin Xiao's Hellfire. It was because he was an ice elemental, a rank 8 ice elemental. If he really did not want to let go of the Black Dragon base, it would not have been destroyed by the zombie tide so quickly. Gao Haoyun's expression froze, but he quickly returned to normal. He pretended to be sad. How can I not care? That is the base that I built with my own hands, and now it has been swallowed by the zombie tide. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been lost. I am also sad. But I heard that the Black Dragon base has a lot of troubles, and Du Kuanqing has been the one to solve them. Moreover, he has not given up on your base, and is still trying to survive in the underground base. At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly stepped to the side and walked out from behind Wu Qingyue. She said to Gao Haoyun with a smile. Her smile was different from Wu Qingyue's. Wu Qingyue's smile was moist and elegant, like a warm spring breeze. On the other hand, Lin Xiao's smile was cold and indifferent. It was not exactly a sneer, but it was a smile with a bit of arrogance. There was a hint of cheerfulness, and it made people feel comfortable, but it was impossible to ignore her pressure. Lin Xiao's expression was calm, and her smile was elegant. However, her words were like a knife stabbing into Gao Haoyun's heart and a slap to his face. That's right, Du Kuanqing was the one who truly cared about the Black Dragon base. Although Du Kuanqing's character was somewhat sinister and cunning, his starting point was for the sake of his base. He had put in a lot of effort for the Black Dragon base, which was why the survivors of the Black Dragon base had a stable shelter. However, in the eyes of outsiders, they only saw the powerful Gao Haoyun. In this post-apocalyptic world, strength was everything. People respected the strong, and the strongest person would naturally become the leader. However, not every leader would do their best for the survivors of the base. As for Gao Haoyun, he didn't care much about the situation of the survivors in the Black Dragon base. He only cared about his private army and subordinates. However, he didn't want outsiders to know about this. In any case, people thought that he was strong, and he was the leader of the Black Dragon base. He had the ability to stand with these leaders. However, after hearing what Lin Xiao said, he felt that his disguise had been exposed, and he felt slightly inferior in front of these people. Du Kuanqing is only doing what he should do. Is there a problem? Gao Haoyun's eyes flashed with a fierce light, but he quickly concealed it. He looked at Lin Xiao with a faint smile, and his eyes couldn't help but sweep up and down her delicate body. That's right. Among the leaders here, the Ice Demon leader is the most relaxed. Unlike us, although we are leaders, we have to be responsible for every survivor in the base. It's really worrisome. Lin Xiao smiled as she looked at Gao Haoyun. Everyone could see that she was only a rank 7 metahuman, but she was fearless against the rank 8 metahuman, Gao Haoyun. Her aura wasn't any weaker than the people here. Moreover, there was a faint feeling that Gao Haoyun was going to be weaker, but they didn't know if it was an illusion. At this time, Wu Qingyue took another step forward and silently shielded half of Lin Xiao's body behind him. He smiled and said, I just asked Vice Leader Ho from Huaxia. You guys seem to have not figured out the cause of the zombie tide. I thought Leader Gao was already here, so you guys should at least know the reason for the zombie tide. Wu Qingyue's words successfully made Gao Haoyun's expression stiffen again. What do you mean? Sikong Chun, who had been expressionless, narrowed his eyes. He glanced at Gao Haoyun before looking at Wu Qingyue with doubt. I think Leader Sikong doesn't need to ask. You should know in your heart. Stand to the side. Can you stop blocking in front of me? Lin Xiao sneered at Sikong Chun as she raised her hand and pushed Wu Qingyue to the side. This person had completely blocked her aura by pushing her back, okay? This made her very unhappy. She had always been the one to protect others and didn't need others to protect her. Being protected like this made her feel weak. Wu Qingyue turned around and looked at her with a sullen expression. I just don't want you to be seen by others. Ungrateful female zombie. Duan Wan, who was behind Lin Xiao, also had a cold expression, but her face was calm as if she was used to it. In the past, Lin Xiao was also like this. Wherever she went, the first thing she would face would be the vulgar and disgusting gazes of these men. But soon, these people would know that her boss could only watch from afar. If he wanted to press her under his body and play with her, it would depend on whether he had the life to do so. Just as the atmosphere in the Huaxia command room became a little tense due to the arrival of Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao, on the other side of the thundercloud, a few figures flashed. Roar! A zombie with a face full of purplish-green blood streaks bared its teeth and twisted its terrifying face. He stood on the ruins, surrounded by black smoke and flames, as if it had been blown up by countless grenades. It was a terrible sight to behold. The ferocious-looking zombie slightly bent its back. Its 10 black nails were about 5 to 6 centimeters long, shining with a cold light. The ground beneath his feet spread outwards. Within a few hundred meters of the square garden, the surrounding buildings and trees were all destroyed, turning into pieces of broken walls and tiles. Traces of black ash from the fire could be seen everywhere. This zombie had a powerful and brutal aura around it, making the high-level zombies a few hundred meters away from it to be careful. It seemed like if something went wrong, these level 1 and level 2 king-level zombies would instantly turn around and run away. Roar dash at this time. The brutal zombie slightly straightened its body, raised its head, and roared softly. But its voice was a little weak and unstable. A white shadow quickly flashed to its side, raised its hand, and pressed on its shoulder. A white light began to shine along with that hand. Chapter 775. The berserk zombies slowly calmed down under the power of the female zombie in the white dress. He raised his head, and the veins on his face were wriggling strangely. Under his bangs, a pair of black eyes flashed with purple light, reflecting a fierce and cruel look. Except for the level 5 zombies in the white dress, the other zombies still didn't dare to come close. Mo Yin panted heavily as he raised his head and looked around. He realized that one of the rank first kings was missing. There were still 5 level second kings left. Roar dash! Where did he go? Mo Yin roared while he was panting. His voice carried an irresistible pressure. After he asked, the other zombies slightly paused and became much quieter. However, the zombies still didn't dare to come close to him. They just looked at him from afar. Mo Yin looked at them like this and turned his head to look at the female zombie with his horrifying face. The female zombie's body stiffened under his gaze, but she quickly gathered her courage and roared, roar dash. Mo Yin was dazed and looked at her in confusion. She said that her companion was dead. Mo Yin was confused about how that subordinate died. What happened when he had a fit? That's right, Mo Yin's mania was getting fiercer and fiercer recently, and the frequency of it was getting more and more frequent. And every time he woke up, it would always be a mess around him. But he didn't remember anything. The female zombie turned around and looked at the other zombies. The other zombies looked at each other. Then, a second-grade king quietly retreated and quickly disappeared from this place. But not long after, he appeared again. He was holding a corpse in his hand, and the corpse was already burnt. There was a burnt smell, but the zombies couldn't smell it. Mo Yin was shocked when he saw the corpse. What made him shocked was not the corpse's appearance, but the residual power of his power on the corpse. Therefore, this indicated that this subordinate had been killed by his own lightning bolt. He actually killed the subordinates that he had trained with his own hands when he had a fit. Although these subordinates weren't human, they had been with him for 2 to 3 years. They were all his subordinates. Anyway, he wasn't a human anymore, and he hated human beings. Looking at the zombies that had been with him for the longest time dying, Mo Yan's zombie heart was also in pain. Even when the 6 subordinates were kidnapped by the strange zombie not long ago, he didn't feel so much pain, because he knew that the other party was a female zombie, but he didn't feel any killing intent towards him or his men. Even when he was plotting against her base, the other party didn't reveal any real killing intent. His intuition told him that nothing bad would happen to the zombies that she took away, so he finally gave up on fighting with the female zombie. Anyway, sooner or later he would go back, and at that time he would find a way to get back at her. However, when he saw the lifeless corpse in front of him, his heart sank. His heavy aura had already affected the surrounding zombie kings. All the zombies silently suppressed their breath, and at the same time, they didn't dare to breathe too loudly. However, Mo Yan quickly retracted his aura and slowly walked over to the corpse. The zombies that brought the corpse over had already retreated. His heart ached, but since she was already dead, he could only force himself to accept it. Fortunately, his heart had already hardened a lot and wouldn't have any more emotions, even though he had lost a subordinate, and it was even killed by him. In his heart, there was only a little bit of pity, a little bit of heartache, and a little bit of guilt. It was like he had a few obedient dogs, and he really liked them, but one day he accidentally killed one of them. That kind of feeling. Mo Yan walked over to the corpse, squatted down, and sighed. Then he opened his claws and poked the corpse's head with his fingers. Catch a dash, with a slight twist of his wrist, the zombie's head was split open. After taking out the zombie core, he squeezed it in his palm. The zombie core was crushed and quickly turned into energy that seeped into Mo Yan's palm. Mo Yan stood up and turned his head to look at the direction of China's base. He felt that there were 2 new auras over there, and they were the ones that he had encountered not long ago. That female zombie actually came over. Interesting. The veins on Mo Yan's face slowly retreated to the left side of his face and shrunk to the side of his neck and a small part of his face. A light flashed in his eyes. Roar dash! He turned his head and gave an order to his subordinates. The zombies immediately scrambled to leave and ran as fast as they could. Mo Yan's mission was still the same as before. Gather the zombies, the more the better. He looked at the huge circle of zombies that had formed outside of China's base and felt that it was still not enough. Still not enough. Those powerful paranormals still hadn't come out. The strongest paranormals on the wall were only level 6, and there wasn't a single level 7 paranormal. It seemed that the zombie tide that he had created was not enough to pressure them. On the other side of China's command room, everyone was already sitting around the semicircle table in front of the big screen. Those who could sit at the table were naturally the leaders. Lin Xiao's seat was arranged to the side, and she was like a vase. At least in the eyes of these leaders and directors, Lin Xiao was only beautiful. As for strength, she had just entered level 7. How strong could she be? Looking at Wu Qingyue beside her, everyone had a tacit understanding that Wu Qingyue was the one who helped her become the leader. Wu Qingyue was sitting on the right side of Sikong Chan in the middle. He crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the chair as he smiled and said, "Looks like the situation is still optimistic. At least we haven't reached level 7 yet." His eyes would occasionally glance at the seat next to Lin Xiao. Sikong Chan was sitting in front of the screen. On the left was Gao Haoyun. Wu Qingyue originally wanted to sit next to Lin Xiao, but someone beat him to it and sat down. That person was Hu Zhiyong. He thought that no matter how lustful Hu Zhiyong was, he wouldn't dare to make a move on Lin Xiao in such an important meeting. However, he didn't expect that before Lin Xiao sat down, this person had the guts to reach out his perverted hand to grab her hand. He even smiled and asked Lin Xiao to sit down while rubbing her hand. Lin Xiao stood there without moving and calmly smiled at Hu Zhiyong, who was rubbing her hand. "Director Hu, don't blame me for not reminding you. My hand is poisonous." The smile on Hu Zhiyong's face froze, and then he said indifferently, "Is that so? Beauty, your hand is so smooth. How could it be poisonous?" His face showed that he didn't care, but he let go of her hand. Lin Xiao sat down with a faint smile and said, "You should be glad that you only used one hand to touch me." Hu Ziyong seriously looked at Lin Xiao's eyes and thought that this woman must be lying to him. It couldn't be poisonous. If it was, his hand would still be fine. Chapter 776. Lin Xiao just smiled and glanced at his hand. Hu Ziyong immediately felt a sharp pain coming from the hand that had just grabbed Lin Xiao's hand. "Ah, you!" Hu Ziyong's face suddenly changed. Then, he suddenly covered his hand with a pained expression. He stared at Lin Xiao in disbelief. He obviously couldn't believe that this woman actually dared to poison him. "I advise you to quickly chop off this hand. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep your life for long." Lin Xiao sat down with one hand on the table and tilted her neck to support half of her face. She put away the smile on her face and said to him coldly. Everyone was stunned by this turn of events. They looked at Lin Xiao in confusion and disbelief. They could not believe that this woman would dare to attack a rank 7 powerhouse in front of so many chief-level powerhouses in such an occasion. Only Wu Qingyue reacted quickly. He sneered at Hu Ziyong and cursed in his heart. "You! When did you poison me?" Hu Ziyong's body trembled. He stood up from the chair and pulled away from Lin Xiao. He didn't chop off his hand like Lin Xiao said. He only used his special ability to block his hand and tried to force the poison out. He glared at Lin Xiao angrily and asked while gritting his teeth. He quickly realized that his special ability couldn't even stop the poison from spreading, let alone force it out. In just 2 sentences, his hand was in pain from his entire palm to his forearm. Then it quickly rushed up his arm. At this moment, his face was covered in sweat. The veins on his forehead were bulging and his face was blue. He looked like he was in great pain. At this moment, Gao Haoyun suddenly waved his hand and immediately froze Hu Ziyong's hand into ice. Gao Haoyun looked at Lin Xiao and his eyes flickered. Lin Xiao shrugged and said indifferently, "Then let's freeze it first. It won't be frozen for long anyway." She didn't use fire to directly burn his hand. Instead, she used fire mist to permeate it. Because there was too little mist, it could only temporarily flow along the blood vessels. However, this was also extremely painful. Now that it was frozen by the level 8 Gao Haoyun's ability, its attributes were temporarily suppressed. However, if the ice on Hu Ziyong's hand melted, he would immediately feel the burning pain again. Sikong Chen looked at Hu Ziyong, then at Lin Xiao. The expression in his eyes darkened. Lin Xiao met his gaze, thinking that he would plead for Hu Ziyong. In the end, this person just looked at her quietly, without any expression on his face. Even his eyes were calm and deep, making it impossible to see through his emotions. Hu Ziyong heaved a sigh of relief when his hand was frozen by Gao Haoyun. It was truly a clash of ice and fire. It was enough for him to endure. After catching his breath, he fiercely glared at Lin Xiao. With a ferocious and murderous expression, he gnashed his teeth and said, "You are courting death, woman. Don't think you can be so arrogant just because you have a poison arcana. Just you wait." However, Lin Xiao didn't even look at him as he said to Sikong Chun, "Chief Sikong, the people in your base probably won't be able to hold on much longer if this continues. How are you going to break through this zombie tide?" She knew that China's military ammunition had already been used up. Whatever artillery shells, missiles, and bombs were almost all thrown into the zombie tide, but it still couldn't stop the zombie tide's endless attack. Every time a hole was blown up, it would immediately be filled up. Every time a group was killed, another group would immediately rush up from behind. There was no end to it, no end to it. Looking outside, standing on the high walls, they couldn't even see the edge of the zombie tide. Because the zombie tide had already congested more than 10 kilometers away, it was impossible to find a place without zombies outside of China's base. Energy bombs that were too powerful, like missiles or nuclear bombs, could only be used if they abandoned this place. However, there were still 2 million survivors here. It was impossible to bring them all away. Therefore, Chen wouldn't use such a powerful weapon unless it was the last resort. He had it, but it wasn't time for him to use it yet. At least he had used up all kinds of small land missiles. Short range, medium range, and other than the long-range ones, he had used almost all of them. However, against the increasing number of zombies, it didn't have any effective effect. Outside of China's wall, not only were the zombies piled up, their corpses were also piled up. The low-power bullets were used up, but the high-power bullets still couldn't be used. The other guns and ammunition were also gradually running out, so they could only rely on metahumans. As for the powerful metahumans, they still haven't come out. It's not that they don't want to come out, but if they don't deal with the main cause of the zombie tide, they would only be wasting their metahumans. Chen looked at Lin Xiao without saying a word, but his eyes had a hint of prying. He opened his mouth and said, "There is no way to find out the situation in the minefield." This meant that they knew that the minefield was the cause of the zombie tide, and they also knew that it was the zombie emperor. However, they couldn't even get close to the zombie emperor, and they couldn't find out the other party's situation, so they didn't know how to deal with it. However, they could at least see the most obvious characteristic of it. Chen looked at Wu Qingyue. As long as one wasn't blind, they could also see that the zombie emperor was lightning type. It was unknown what the difference was between a rank 8 lightning type zombie emperor and a rank 8 metahuman. Lin Xiao looked at Gao Haoyun and said to Chen, "From what I know, this zombie emperor came from the Black Dragon base. Doesn't the ice demon leader know why he was so reluctant? Before your base was breached, a group of people had already died, right? Could it be that it has nothing to do with this?" Chen looked at Lin Xiao with a cold glint in his eyes. Then he looked at Wu Qingyue. He didn't expect the information from these two to be so detailed, and this woman was becoming more and more complicated. Even after coming here and facing so many of the strongest people in the post-apocalyptic era, her attitude was still calm and relaxed. Moreover, she didn't tolerate the invasion of others and retaliated on the spot. Decisive, efficient, and brutal. Regarding this, none of us have come into contact with the zombie emperor. We have already sent one of our directors to investigate, but we still haven't received any news. Even the rank 7 director has lost contact with us. At this moment, Wei Haiqing suddenly appeared and sighed. It was obvious that he was telling Lin Xiao that they went out to find the reason. They just haven't found it yet. Could it be that the ice demon leader from the Black Dragon base doesn't know? At this moment, Wu Qingyue asked doubtfully, "Why do I have to know?" Gao Haoyun sneered. "Because they came after you." Wu Qingyue smiled and swept a glance at him. Gao Haoyun's expression choked. "That's right. But they can't say that he was the one who led them here, right?" Chapter 777. At this time, no one cared about Hu Zhiyong, who was sitting on the other side with a pained expression. In the eyes of those who understood, this guy was reaping what he sowed. But there were also people who felt it was unfair for him. Seeing this woman attack Hu Zhiyong and then change the topic with Chen and the others, Lu Jinan couldn't help but say with a gloomy face, "Woman, you dare to hurt our Huaxia base's director without reason. You didn't come here to help us fight against the zombie tide, did you?" These words seemed to imply that Lin Xiao came here with ulterior motives. Without reason? If this director, who didn't grab someone's hand, how could he be poisoned? You have to know that even I don't dare to touch this Miss Lu. Director who really has guts. Before Lin Xiao could say anything, Wu Qingyue said with a smile. But when he looked at Hu Zhiyong, his eyes were extremely cold, and a trace of killing intent flashed through. It was just holding hands, and you want to cripple someone's arm? This Miss Lu is a bit too tyrannical. Lu Jinan snorted. He looked at Hu Zhiyong and saw that his face was pale, and his eyes were a bit unfocused as he leaned against the chair. Although Gao Haoyun helped him freeze his arm, the pain just now had clearly made him collapse. He still hadn't recovered yet. Do you know that men and women shouldn't touch each other? Do you know what molestation is? Touching someone without the consent of the woman and having dirty thoughts. I just want him to remember that not just any woman can be touched. Lin Xiao sneered and said with a calm expression, He only invited you to sit down with good intentions. You think that someone is molesting you. Your skin is thicker than the walls of the base. Lu Jinan sneered and said mockingly. Lin Xiao looked at him, and his head continued to tilt. A light flashed in his eyes, and he said indifferently, if your mom was walking on the street and a stranger held her hand, you wouldn't care if that person was molesting your mom. I don't care. But now that I said he was molesting me, he is. Unless his hand is frozen like this for the rest of his life, it will still be crippled. What can you do? You. Unreasonable. Lu Jinan glared at her with a pale face. If he just sits there and doesn't take the initiative to touch me, of course it would be fine. Who asked him to harbor evil intentions and want to take advantage of her? Reap what you sow. Well, this problem isn't important for the time being. The important thing is how to deal with the zombie horde outside or the lightning-type corpse emperor, right? Am I right? Leader C. Lin Xiao smiled calmly and changed the topic back to Si Kongchen. This was the fate of those who dared to try to take advantage of her. Did they think that she was easy to bully just because she was young and beautiful? Si Kongchen glanced at Hu Zhiyong and said with an indifferent expression, looking at Director Hu's appearance, he won't die for a while. Let's see if there's any way to investigate the corpse emperor. As long as no one causes trouble again. Wu Qingyue smiled as he glanced at Hu Zhiyong, then glanced at Lu Jinan. Gao Haoyan also became silent at this moment, but the way he looked at Lin Xiao was much more restrained. It wasn't as blatant as before. He didn't expect this woman to have a poison ability. Previously, he only knew that the new base next to Haiqing was a female leader, but he didn't know anything else about this female leader. So if he wanted to touch her, he had to first control her ability if she wasn't willing. This was a bit troublesome, but with such a beautiful and alluring appearance, it was worth it no matter how troublesome it was. But it wasn't the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. It was better to get her first. If he could get her to willingly lie down under him, then it wouldn't be so troublesome. Gao Haoyan looked at Lin Xiao's eyes with all kinds of thoughts in his mind. Fortunately, his gaze was much more restrained, and the others couldn't see that he was still thinking about the beautiful leader. But to Lin Xiao, this gaze was still too obvious. Tell me, what do you guys plan to do next? Although we're here, we definitely won't just stand and watch. I just don't know how much firearms the Huaxia base will pay. At this time, Wu Qingyue withdrew his gaze that had assassinated Hu Zhiyong 10,000 times and smiled at Si Kongchen. His words made it clear that they weren't here to help for free. If they wanted to help, not only would they have to pay, but they would also have to see how much was given. The more they gave, the more help they would be able to provide. Smart people were easy to talk to, and everyone understood the meaning behind his words. In terms of firearms, you've also seen that we're lacking the most right now. Or can you change it to something else? How about the energy core? Si Kongchen looked at Wu Qingyue expressionlessly. There's no need to give it now, I can wait. Anyway, you guys can make it yourself here. When the quantity is enough, you can send it to Haiqing. Wu Qingyue smiled and waved his hand. That's not a problem. Since Haiqing wants firearms, you can just write down a list and give it to me. What does Miss Lu want? Si Kongchen agreed to Wu Qingyue's conditions and turned to look at Lin Xiao expressionlessly. Oh, I don't need it. I'm just here to watch the show. If you really need my help, then we'll talk about what I want. Don't worry, your Huaxia base can afford it. Lin Xiao smiled and replied casually. Just when people here were bargaining, people in other bases outside also received the news that Haicheng had joined. In the border town of another city next to Huaxia City, it might be 30 or 40 kilometers away from Huaxia, but they could quickly know the distance after receiving the information. This time, it was not Li Jingye who came out, but another leader. This was a young man who seemed to be in his 30s. He was thin and of medium height, estimated to be about 175 meters. His appearance was ordinary, which was the kind of type that couldn't be found in the crowd. But when people saw his eyes, they would inexplicably have a kind of cold feeling. In addition, his temperament was gloomy. Standing beside this person always made people uncomfortable. Su Chamu followed him and asked, "Can Haicheng get any benefits if we join at this time?" After all, the firearms and ammunition have almost been consumed in Huaxia base. Is Si Kongchen willing to take out the remaining powerful nuclear weapons? Not until the last step. The current situation can't be predicted, Gui Kong said in a low and cold voice. His voice was not like that of ordinary people. It was a little hoarse, but not abrasive. Because of the hoarse voice, it was a little magnetic. Originally, it was a very pleasant voice, but it was full of strong cold taste, which made people very uncomfortable. He continued, although the situation in Huaxia looks very unfavorable now, Xikongchen has kept a lot of trump cards. It is estimated that he will use these to exchange with other bases. Chapter 778. Because the number of zombies is still increasing, Xikongchen will not take out those powerful weapons that can destroy an entire city for the time being. Thus, he should still have a lot of trump cards. Then did he get reinforcements just to fight against the zombies? Isn't that a loss? Su Chamu asked in confusion. Gui Kong said with a deep gaze. He did not get experts just to deal with ordinary zombies. They're going to deal with the zombie emperor. 3 rank 8 metahumans can basically kill a zombie emperor without letting it escape. Against a rank 8 zombie emperor, rank 7 metahumans are no longer useful. On the other side, the people from Qingshan base who were hiding not far away from Huaxia base also reacted when they received the news of Wu Qingyue's group entering. Wow, they went in. Should we go in as well? Otherwise, Wu Qingyue will have the upper hand. If we go in, won't we be left behind in Ocean City? A girl with long, wavy hair, big eyes, and a baby face stood beside Lan Lu and said with an anxious expression, "Little Yi, calm down. The other party has just arrived. They will not make a move so quickly." Xikongchen still wants to negotiate with them. Zheng Hao, who was standing beside Lei Cheng, looked at Yi Ingyue with an amused expression. At this time, a piece of paper was handed over. On it was written, "Universal Base's female leader is also here." Everyone was stunned when they saw this. They looked up at the few people beside them who were wearing masks over their heads. They still have not figured out the strength of the zombie emperor. They will not make a move so quickly. Lan Lu's eyes flashed. He smiled and continued. But if the female leader of Universal Base is helping them, they should be able to make some progress soon. Then, are we still going to continue watching? Yinghua looked at him with her big round eyes and asked, with a round baby face and a pair of big eyes. Even though she was already in her 20s, Yinghua still looked like an 18-year-old girl. Lan Lu shook his head and said with a smile on his face, "No, we are also preparing to go over. Let's see how they are going to deal with the zombie emperor." Actually, you want to meet the female leader, right? You're waiting for her. The handsome but expressionless Lei Cheng said. Lan Lu looked at him with a smile and did not say anything. The last base of the Meng clan, which was very weak, did not intend to join. He decided to watch the progress from afar. In the command center of the Huaxia base, everyone was looking at the situation on the screen while looking for any minefields. The duration of each disappearance is different. Sometimes it's a few hours, and sometimes it's a day or two. Wei Haichao, one of the directors of Huaxia base, introduced the minefield to Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao. We've sent out several batches of people, and the strongest of them has even reached level 7. But until now, no one has come back to reveal the situation. Xikongchen looked at the zombies that were constantly rushing up the wall, and his eyes were very depressed. He wasn't even a level 7 Beast King by his side, so how could he possibly come back? Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue thought to themselves. Therefore, the first thing we need to do now is to find out more about this zombie emperor. But who's going? Xiao Lin interrupted. Without sufficient information, the chances of success for any battle plan would be greatly reduced. The way I see it, we don't need to gather information, we just need to kill the 3 of us, and we will know. Do you think he can escape from the 3 of us? Gao Haoyun expressed that it would be better to just kill the zombie emperor. If it was just a zombie emperor, even if there were level 6 or level 7 Beast Kings by his side, those Beast Kings would not be a match for level 8 metahumans. I agree with Leader Gao's method. Lu Jinan looked at Xiao Lin coldly and said. Xiao Lin shrugged and did not say anything. If it was just a normal zombie emperor, it might not be able to escape from 3 level 8 metahumans. But Mo Yan's current situation was not right. He was going berserk more and more frequently, causing his berserk aura to become stronger. If he suddenly went berserk while being attacked, it would not be easy to kill him. At this time, Mo Yan had sensed the 2 familiar auras and learned from his subordinates that a few aircrafts had flown into Huaxia Base. He looked coldly at the direction of Huaxia Base. Killing intent flashed in his eyes. Asking for reinforcements? Roar dash. At this time, the female zombie beside him roared at him worriedly. Mo Yan looked back at her and shook his head. Then he turned to look at Huaxia Base. He would not leave until he killed all of them. Even if he went berserk and completely lost his mind, he would not give up. The female zombie was only level 5. She could not suppress his situation. At most, she would only be able to prolong the time. There was not much time left. He could not wait any longer. Maybe there would be other Beast Kings coming to help the people in Huaxia Base. After thinking for a while, he suddenly turned his head and roared at the female zombie. Then his figure flashed and disappeared. At this time, the sky above the north gate of Huaxia Base began to gather black clouds. Dense lightning began to flash in the black clouds. Rumble dash, a low rumble of thunder could be heard. In the command room, Sikong Chun suddenly stood up. Not good. The thunderclouds appeared at the gate of the base. Wei Haichao shouted anxiously. Previously, these thunderclouds had been moving everywhere, but they had never come close to the base. This time, they directly rushed to the gate. Boom dash, before anyone could react, they saw a huge thick lightning strike down from the screen. With a boom, it exploded on the top wall of the gate. Then the screen on the screen suddenly crackled and disappeared. What happened? This time, there was only one lightning strike. Although there were a lot of lightning strikes before, the power was very small. Now, with the power of this lightning, I'm afraid that the base's wall will be destroyed in 2 more strikes. At this time, Hong Yijie frowned and said with some surprise. The screen was destroyed by the magnetic field of the lightning, and immediately, the small screens next to it showed the scene of that location. Then, they saw that the gate that was already emitting thick smoke was once again struck down by a lightning as thick as a human body. In this situation, there was no point for everyone to stay in the command room. Sikong Chin immediately turned around and strode out of the command room. The others immediately got up and followed him out. Although Hu Zhiyong's hand was frozen, it did not affect his walking. He fiercely stared at Lin Xiao, looking like he wanted to eat her. This woman dared to make him lose face in front of so many leaders. He must find a way to catch her, then ruthlessly humiliate her, and then kill her. Chapter 779. Everyone could feel Hu Zhiyong's resentful gaze, let alone Lin Xiao. But before she could turn around, a figure blocked her from behind. Don't blame me for not reminding you, Director Hu. In your current state, you should stay here and rest. Don't go to the front line, it's too dangerous. What if someone accidentally breaks your arm? Wu Qingyue walked behind Lin Xiao, turned around, and said to Hu Zhiyong with a smile on his face. Hu Zhiyong stared at him with a dark expression and didn't say anything. His lips had already turned blue from the cold, and his pale face was covered in sweat. Very quickly, everyone exited the command tower, following which their silhouettes flashed, and in the blink of an eye, all the leaders had disappeared. Hu Zhiyong, who walked out a step later, stared at the place where Lin Xiao disappeared, and a cold, murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Then he moved forward and also disappeared. A few figures appeared on the city wall a few hundred meters away from the gate that was bombarded by the lightning. Another bolt of lightning fell from the sky. However, this lightning bolt's momentum was about to fall. Just as it was about to collapse, it suddenly made a turn and flew to the side. Zizi, Wu Qingyue waved his hand to catch the lightning bolt and looked around with a calm expression. I'm here. I can block these lightning bolts. You guys do as you see fit. Wu Qingyue looked around and didn't find the zombie emperor's aura, so he turned his head slightly and said to the people next to him, Chen took a step forward and looked at the iron wall on the other side of the gate. There were several holes in the wall. Because of the power of the lightning bolt, the holes on the iron wall were cracked. There was a lot of movement here, but other than the ordinary zombies that were still swarming up, there were no zombies above level 4. Although they knew that there was a zombie emperor outside, they had no idea where it was. Even if they wanted to deal with it, they had to have a target, but they didn't even know where the target was. Lin Xiao knew where it was, but would she tell them? Of course not. She was really here to watch the show, and also, Lin Xiao glanced at the Huaxiao base behind her without anyone noticing. When she came out, she had already released Lin Kuei's 2 level first kings, Yi Qingxian and Mo, from the space as fast as she could, and asked them to find Lin Kuei's sister. After Lin Kuei came out, he hid in the dark with the 2 level 1 kings. He followed the information from his previous memories and quickly sneaked in a certain direction. Not long after, he arrived at the place. It was a residential area for ordinary people. Usually, it would be crowded and messy, but now it was very quiet. There were few people around, and the doors and windows of the houses on the buildings were all tightly shut. The 3 zombies sniffed the smell of humans. The smell was messy, but it wasn't fresh. It was like a lingering smell that was slowly disappearing. Judging from the smell, the number of living humans had decreased a lot. This was because most of the young men had been taken to the city wall to fight against the zombie tide. Most of the people left here were the old, the weak, the sick, and women. After Lin Kuei arrived nearby, he hid on a tree and carefully sniffed the surrounding scents. Then his expression sank slightly, and his expression became somewhat solemn. In a flash, he jumped onto the roof next to the tree and continued to jump in another direction. His speed was very fast, and there were 2 rank 1 zombie kings following behind him. Not long after, he arrived at a residential area. There were many 5-story to 7-story buildings, both big and small. Lin Kuei found one of the buildings with familiarity and climbed down from the balcony window from the top of the building. When he reached the balcony of a room on the 5th floor, he stopped outside. There were metal anti-theft bars installed on the windows of the balcony of the building. Lin Kuei turned his head and looked around. It was quiet. Even if he was such a big zombie, hanging outside the balcony of a building, no one seemed to notice him. He gave a look to the level 1 king next to him. Mo waved his hand, and the metal bar in front of Lin Kuei immediately changed shape and opened a hole. After entering the house, Lin Kuei's expression became even more gloomy. There was no one in the house. This was a single-room rental house with 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and 1 kitchen. The kitchen and the balcony were together. Lin Kuei had been here many times before, and it was full of familiar smells. But now, these smells were slowly dissipating. This was the smell left behind, and it had become very difficult to talk about. If they were not zombies, and their noses were hundreds of times more sensitive than dogs, they would not be able to smell these smells. This meant that the owner of this house had not lived here for a long time, at least for more than half a year. The person who was supposed to live here had not been here for half a year. So, where did he go? Looking at the furnishings in the house, everything was covered with a thin layer of dust. A lot of daily necessities were gone, and so were clothes. It seemed that the original owner had moved away. Lin Kuei did not know where his sister who lived here had moved to, and why she left. But in the entire China base, there was no smell of his sister other than this place. That was only within a general range. Lin Kuei thought for a while, and immediately got out of the house and climbed to the top of the building. Once again, he carefully sniffed in all directions. Nothing. Still nothing. There was nothing in this area. So Lin Kuei immediately left with the 2 level 1 king zombies and went to the next area. At this time, at the location of the door that was bombed by the lightning, Wu Qingwei connected with a few lightning strikes, and Mo Yin stopped for a while. When Chen arrived, he casually threw out a few fire dragons towards the zombies under the wall. The temperature of the fire dragons was very high, and it carried a heat that could burn a person as it rushed towards the zombies. The zombies that were pounced on by the fire dragons were all burned into ashes as soon as they fell. The fire dragons moved back and forth under the wall, and very quickly, The zombies that had piled up like a mountain were burned into ashes, and the ashes were blown away by the wind. Sikong Chen's face was calm and collected, and his control over the fire dragons was also very casual. His eyes were carefully observing the surroundings, and he wanted to see where the zombie emperor was hiding and controlling the lightning ability to bomb the door. But it was not only him. Everyone was also observing the surroundings. They did not find any traces of the zombie emperor. Only Lin Xiao had a calm expression as he glanced at a certain place, and then at another place. At this moment, the black clouds in the sky began to flicker with electric snakes. Boom, rumble dash, the dull sound of thunder came from above. You also can't feel the location of the energy? Sikongchen suddenly turned his head to look at Wu Qingyue and asked. Wu Qingyue shook his head. I can't feel it. He was not lying. He really couldn't feel the connection point of the opponent's lightning. Chapter 780. However, this time, the lightning was clearly not falling randomly. It was striking down with a purpose. It was obvious that the aim was being controlled. Moreover, after Wu Qingyue received a few lightning bolts, he immediately stopped his useless attacks. However, the rolling thunder and lightning were brewing in the dark clouds in the sky. Even though they were quite a distance apart, Lin Xiao could still sense that Mo Yin had retracted his aura. It seemed that he was awake. He didn't seem to be in a frenzied state. She lowered her eyes slightly and stood on the side like a vase. In this densely packed group of zombies in front of him, there were no zombies from level 3 to level 5. It wasn't that Mo Yin didn't want to summon them, but that he had already killed them all. She could sense that Mo Yan's subordinates were on the verge of breaking through. He just didn't know how strong Mo Yan's chi had become. Could it be that his loss of control had something to do with absorbing too much corpse core energy? Just as Lin Xiao was guessing Mo Yan's situation, the lightning snakes in the sky suddenly struck down from the dark clouds. Hundreds of lightning bolts covered an area of several hundred meters, directly covering the location of the leaders and board members. When everyone saw this, they immediately dodged. Wu Qingyue could handle 1, 2, or 3 of them, but he couldn't handle hundreds of electric snakes of different sizes in a short time. Hu Zhiyong's reaction was slower than the rest because his body was not in a good state, but he still quickly jumped out. However, just as he leaped into the air, a bolt of lightning suddenly struck him out of nowhere. Hu Zhiyong, who was in midair and had nowhere to dodge, was immediately struck by the strange lightning. Hu Zhiyong let out a blood-curdling scream before falling to the ground. Sikong Chun, Gao Haoyun, and the others had just landed when they heard a shout. They immediately turned their heads to look. In the end, he saw Hu Zhiyong lying on the ground outside the city wall. His entire body was charred black, trembling, and smoking. Wu Qingyue, who had landed on the other side, had a dark glint in his eyes. Lin Xiao landed back on the city wall and looked at Hu Zhiyong with the corner of his mouth twitching. He silently looked at Wu Qingyue. Then, with a slight shake of her finger, a tiny wisp of black flame leaped out from her finger. Hu Zhiyong, who had been blasted to the ground, felt his energy leaking out in a disorderly manner. He lay on the ground in a daze and had not yet recovered. Fortunately, Sikong Chun had just used his flame dragon to clear the area outside of the wall. There were no more zombies on the ground, nor were there any corpses. It was just a pile of ash. Hu Zhiyong's frozen hand was now broken. His arm had completely disappeared, but perhaps because it was frozen, the blood did not flow out of the wound. Even the pinkish-white flesh was frozen white. Without waiting for him to wake up, a small black flame attached itself to his body. Then, with a boom, Hu Zhiyong's body suddenly ignited with a black flame. Before he could scream, the black flames had already melted his throat and neck. In the blink of an eye, the rest of the head also began to disappear. In the blink of an eye, the rank 7 metahuman, Hu Zhiyong, had disappeared, leaving only a shining energy core on the ground. Hu Zhiyong. Lu Jinan had just landed in a safe position and did not notice that Hu Zhiyong had been struck by lightning. When he followed Hu Zhiyong's aura and looked at the ground outside of the city, he saw Hu Zhiyong's body suddenly burst into black flames and burned him to ashes. Lu Jinan's eyes widened in disbelief. The others were also stunned and could not react. But soon, Sikong Chun was the first to react. He glanced at Wu Qingyue and saw that the other party also had a surprised expression. Oh, director who died just like that? Gao Haoyun landed beside Sikong Chun with a surprised expression and stared at the shining energy core on the ground. A figure flashed on the wall. A figure swept down and flashed past the location of the energy core. The energy core then disappeared. Ho Guozhong flashed to Sikong Chin's side and handed the energy core in his hand to him. He was a rank 7 wind metahuman. His speed was naturally much faster than others. Sikong Chun held the energy core with a gloomy expression. He raised his head and looked at Ho Guozhong. Ho Guozhong nodded. Sikong Chun glanced at Wu Qingyue vaguely. The others did not know why Hu Zhiyong was hit by one of the lightning strikes. They all thought that Hu Zhiyong was in a bad state and did not react fast enough to dodge the lightning. Only Sikong Chun vaguely sensed a slight energy fluctuation from Wu Qingyue. However, he could not sense where the black flames came from. Sikong Chin's face was gloomy, but he did not make any other reaction. Hu Zhiyong and Lu Jinan had always been against him, thinking that they did not put him, the leader, in their eyes just because their abilities had reached rank 7. If it was not for the fact that the two of them had some combat power at rank 7 and were useful to the base, he would not have tolerated their arrogance. But now, when it was time to use their combat power, they died so quickly. Although the two of them were in charge of research, their research skills were not the best. Boom! 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 The dense lightning struck down once again. I can feel it. He's in the southwest direction. At this time, Wu Qingyue suddenly shouted and pointed in the southwest direction. Sikong Chun and Gao Haoyun immediately dashed out. If one were to ask who wanted to kill the zombie emperor the most, the first would be Sikong Chun and the second would definitely be Gao Haoyun. Although he did not care about the survivors of the Black Dragon base, he still cared about the resources of the Black Dragon base. In the end, they were all destroyed by the zombie emperor. How could he not hate the zombie emperor? He really wanted to kill the zombie emperor, but he knew that he would not be able to kill it by himself. He could not even compete with the opponent's lightning ability in terms of power, so he might be able to compete with it in terms of energy. However, he could not compete with the zombie emperor's physique and stamina. Although he cared about the resources of the base, Gao Haoyun was more concerned about his own life. So when he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately abandoned the base and left. Now that he had joined China, he was now a rank 8 metahuman and was on the same level as Sikong Chun in China. So when he came here, he really wanted Sikong Chun to help him kill the zombie emperor. However, they could not find any traces of the zombie emperor, not to mention killing it. So when Wu Qingyue mentioned the location of the zombie emperor, Gao Haoyun and Sikong Chun moved together. While everyone was fighting the zombie emperor outside, the zombies in Lin Xiao's base had nothing to do and began to play cards. That's right, playing cards. Although they did not have memories, their intelligence was still online. Lu Tianyi only explained the rules once, and they quickly started playing. The board Lu Tianyi grabbed pesticide and played landlord with Jing Yin, while Xiao Xiao and the other zombies watched from the side. Chapter 781. A bunch of zombies sat on the flat steps in front of the building, playing in a circle. 3 QS and a pair. Lu Tianyi used his husky zombie-like voice to play the cards down. The next pesticide didn't even think and played his 3 KS and a pair as well. Lu Tianyi rolled his eyes and really wanted to throw the cards in his hand at him. Shouldn't you let him pass at this time? Can't you just leave your 3 KS to play landlord? You and I are both farmers. Why are you playing me? Lu Tianyi stared at pesticide. Jing Yin didn't say anything. She just pulled out the 3 aces and a pair of KS and played them. She was the landlord, although she had a lot of cards in her hand. They were very big. Lu Tianyi directly held his forehead. Pass, pass, pass. 3 aces, unless 3 2s came up, or if there was a bomb. However, he only had a 2s in his hand, and no bomb. How to play? Pesticide looked at the cards in his hand and shook his head. Then, he regretted throwing out the 3 ks. Jing Yin expressionlessly pulled out the 3 7s and a pair and played them. Pesticide stared at the 3 7s and a pair. He really wanted to pick up the 3 ks that he had just played. Jing Yin glanced at him indifferently. Pesticide silently retracted his claws. Fine, he couldn't beat his own kind. Xiao Xiao the cat watched from behind Jing Yin. Although she didn't understand at first, she understood as she watched. Hu Li, who was originally a bit chubby, was sitting on the steps to the side. After curling up into a ball, she looked even more chubby. She placed her hands on her knees and held her chin as she looked at the lake in the distance. She muttered softly, "When will leader let us out to play? It's so boring in here." It was clearly very lively outside, but in the end, they could only play landlord in boss's space. Although she didn't transform, it seemed like there was a big tail swaying behind her. Phew, just as she was saying that it was boring, a shadow suddenly ran in front of her. Hu Li's expression froze, and before she could react, she saw a naked zombie dog run in front of her. Oh. Seeing these two, there must be another one around. Hu Li raised his head and looked left and right. As a result, he saw a black snake head the size of a bucket above his head. From time to time, it would spit out its slender tongue. He stared at the mushroom spirit and zombie dog that were running around the buildings like idiots. From time to time, the 3 of them would run out of the forest. The mushroom spirit really loved to run. Like a child with ADHD, it would swing a few of its tentacles and run around randomly. Then he followed the zombie dog to flirt with it. The zombie dog was also brainless. Every time it saw the mushroom spirit, it would immediately chase it. He used to like flirting with Dahe, but now he was flirted with by the mushroom spirit. At first, when the mushroom spirit ran out and trampled on Lu Tianyi's melon and vegetable fields and other agricultural products, Lu Tianyi chased it for a long time with his sickle. Of course, he couldn't catch up with the mutants. The mushroom spirit would get happier the more people chased after it. In addition to Lu Tianyi and the others who were playing the landlord out of boredom, there were others who either absorbed the remaining zombie nuclei on their bodies to cultivate or gathered together to fight. The number of level 3 and level 4 zombies behind them was not small. Now that they were all crowded together, there would definitely be friction. But because Lin Xiao warned them not to use their full strength, they could still fight with their hands and feet. So at the end of the day, they had to fight several times. While the zombies were bustling, the lawn across the lake was also very lively. Goats and roe deers fought every day, and their lives would not stop. In order to let these animals drink water, some time ago, Lin Xiao dug a hole in the grass a few meters away from the lake, and then dug a small ditch to bring some water from the lake for the deer and goats to drink. After such a long time, those roe deers had already given birth to little roe deers. A group of zombies was leisurely inside, and Lin Xiao, who was outside, was also bored watching the chaotic situation being controlled by the Huaxia directors. When Xikong Chun and Gao Haoyin chased in the direction pointed by Wu Qingyue for a few kilometers outside the base, they felt a powerful aura retreating slowly. Both of their spirits were lifted, and their eyes lit up. Wu Qingyue's senses were right. It was indeed in this direction. So the two of them chased after the aura even more closely. Suddenly, at this moment, a few figures flew over from the other side of the building and rushed towards the entrance of the Huaxia base. Lin Xiao could sense who it was from afar. It was the people from Qingshan base. The people from Qingshan base did not directly rush into the base, but stopped on the edge of the building outside the vacuum zone. On the Huaxia side, Hou Guozhong, the deputy leader of the wind ability user, immediately went out to find out the identity of the other party. Not long after, he was seen leading people into the Huaxia base. Our leader and Gao Haoyin from the Black Dragon base are chasing after the zombie emperor. I wonder if leader Lan wants to go over and help? Hou Guozhong smiled at Lan Lu and asked tentatively. Lan Lu had brought 3 people with him, a doll girl and 2 men. Their abilities were at least level 6. No need, they will be back soon. Lan Lu smiled at Ho Guozhong and shook his head. Ho Guozhong looked at him in confusion, not believing Lan Lu's words. Although there were 2 level 8 espers working together to chase after the zombie emperor, even if they could kill it, it would not be that fast. Ho Guozhong looked at Wu Qingyue, who was standing leisurely at the side, and asked, "Do we only need our leader and Gao Haoyan to deal with the zombie emperor?" He was asking Wu Qingyue why he did not go. Moreover, after Gao Haoyan came to Huaxia, no one called him Leader Gao anymore. This was because he did not want the Black Dragon base anymore, so naturally he did not want this leader anymore. It's too late, the zombie emperor has escaped. Wu Qingyue smiled at Ho Guozhong and said. Then he looked at Lan Lu and said, "Your Qingshan base has been nearby for a long time, right? You only came out when you saw us. How cunning." From the looks of it, the situation is not that urgent. Perhaps Leader C still has some tricks up his sleeves. We are afraid of disturbing their battle. Lan Lu smiled at Wu Qingyue and said. Both of them looked at each other with smiles on their faces. The others felt that there was an inexplicable atmosphere between the two of them. Lin Xiao, who was at the side, also looked at the strange hostility in the eyes of the two of them. Didn't he feel that the two of them were on the same side when they had the antidote previously? That's right, speaking of the antidote. Didn't Huaxia just release the antidote to deal with the zombies not long ago? Why was it blocked by the zombie tide now? At this time, Lan Lu smiled and said, "Doesn't Huaxia have the antidote to the zombie virus? Why haven't I seen it used?" Chapter 782. China had been besieged by the zombie horde for almost a month, yet they still hadn't used the antidote. That's why I said this is one of Leader C's trump cards. Lan Lu smiled. That's true. We're just here to join in the fun. Wu Qingyue smiled and said, maybe he's preparing to use it after killing the zombie emperor? If the antidote didn't stop the zombie horde, it would just be a waste. After all, there was an endless horde of zombies. Even if they killed the ones at the front, the ones at the back would still swarm in. See, that's why I said that Leader C doesn't seem to be too worried about the current situation. Lan Lu smiled and looked at the empty space at the bottom of the wall. Sikong Chun had used Huolong to clean up the place, so now that he had left, Huolong would naturally leave as well. When the other directors saw him leave, they naturally made their moves. Those who didn't want to make a move had to put on a show. Otherwise, the other bases would laugh at them. Then why are you in such a hurry to leave? Isn't it more appropriate for you to wait until he's done with his tricks? Wu Qingyue sneered and looked at Lan Lu. Lan Lu looked at him and suddenly turned to look at Lin Xiao and smiled meaningfully. I'm not here just to help Sikong Chun. Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed and smiled. What? You're interested in her? Are you trying to steal her from me? Ah, that's right. Lan Lu turned back and smiled at Wu Qingyue. I'm indeed a little interested in her. He was indeed interested in the female leader and wanted to capture her and dissect her to see how she was different from the other zombies. However, when Wu Qingyue saw the way he stared at Lin Xiao, he wondered if he should give this guy 2 bolts of lightning to kill him. He dared to steal from his wall right in front of him. No, this wall wasn't even his. He didn't know when he started treating Lin Xiao as his own person, but he didn't expect that when she appeared for the first time, she would attract so much attention. Although he knew that this female zombie was indeed very beautiful, he thought that she would at most amaze the men who were used to standing in high positions. Wu Qingyue didn't know that because he was always by Ling Ling's side, he didn't pay much attention to women. However, the people from the other bases were not as pure as him. The higher the status of a man, the younger and more beautiful the women who wanted to get close to him. In the past few years, he had had enough of these ordinary women who came to his door to flatter him. When he saw a beautiful woman with a high status and a high status, he felt that it would be difficult to get his hands on her. It immediately aroused the desire of these men to hunt for women. Therefore, the harder it was to get, the better it would taste in the end. That kind of desire to conquer would make people very excited. Lan Lu's interest in Lin Xiao made Wu Qingyue mistakenly think that this man with a fake smile was also interested in Lin Xiao's beauty. Of course, Lin Xiao also felt Lan Lu's conspicuous gaze, so he came over in a flash. "Is this the leader of your base?" Lin Xiao asked as he looked at Lei Cheng and the other man. Lei Cheng, who had been expressionless all this while, did not expect Lin Xiao to ask him directly instead of greeting his boss. He shook his head. "No, our leader doesn't go out. This is actually a director of our board of directors." Seeing her approach, Lan Lu's gaze directly stuck to Lin Xiao's body, as if he was studying her. He had heard Lei Cheng and the others describe this female leader before, and at a glance, she really looked like a human. If it wasn't for the fact that their Qingshan base also had zombies, the feeling between the same kind would not be wrong. He really did not believe that this young and beautiful female leader was a zombie. Lin Xiao did not come over to deal with Lan Lu, but directly said to the people of Huaxia Base, "It seems that you still have a lot of tricks up your sleeves, so for the time being, you don't need our help. Then I will leave this place to you. If there is anything you need from me, tell her." After saying that, she left Shen Yuzhen behind, jumped down from the wall, and then walked inside. If she wanted to leave, no one would stop her. Everyone also knew that in other people's bases, there were some places they could go and some places they could not go. As a leader, of course, it was impossible to violate other people's bottom line. However, even if no one stopped Lin Xiao, there were still a lot of people staring at her. Lu Jinan always felt that Hu Zhiyong's sudden death was very strange. The first lightning strike could be said to be an accident. Then when he fell to the ground, what was with the black flame that suddenly appeared on his body? The power of the flame reminded everyone of a woman. It was the nether fire of Hades' base. But nether fire died last year, so it was definitely not her now. However, Lu Jinan suspected that there might be a second person who awakened the flame ability similar to the nether fire. He did not suspect that it was Lin Xiao who did it, because Lin Xiao had just shown that her ability was poison, not this kind of flame. But this did not mean that it had nothing to do with Lin Xiao. Maybe she secretly sent someone to do it? So when he saw that Lin Xiao left the top of the wall, he immediately sent someone to follow her. Lin Xiao just turned a corner, and she got rid of the people behind her. Lu Jinan's people followed behind her, and as soon as they saw her turning a corner, she walked into an alley. In the end, when they ran over, she was gone. Lin Xiao quickly went in the direction of Lin Kuei. Because she saw him running around the entire base, she knew that he might not have found the target. Soon, she appeared near Lin Kuei and the other zombies. As soon as she appeared, Lin Kuei and the other two stopped and immediately approached her. "You didn't find him?" Lin Xiao looked at Lin Kuei and asked. Lin Kuei's tail and ears were already exposed, and his long tail was swinging vigorously behind him, looking a little impatient. "No, the original place has not been lived in for half a year." Lin Kuei shook his head and said with some depression. He was afraid that something had happened to his sister, Lin Jing, when he was captured, but the owner of the house had packed up and left. He comforted himself that his sister might have left on her own to go somewhere else. But he was very worried because his sister was an ordinary person. She was not a psychic, and in this base, she completely relied on being a servant for others to survive. Because Lin Kuei had been secretly protecting Lin Jing, the people who had designs on her in the first 2 years had inexplicably disappeared. Later, as time passed, the people around her did not dare to touch her. He had a feeling that she might be protected by someone powerful in the dark. She was mysterious, and in order to not disappear for no reason, those people finally gave up all kinds of bad ideas. Chapter 783. Did she leave by herself? Lin Xiao asked him. Yes, but I don't know the reason. Lin Kuei shook his head and said with disappointment. Lin Xiao thought for a while, then looked at him and said, "Is there anyone living around where she lives now?" Lin Kuei nodded and said, "Yes." "Go and ask," Lin Xiao said. Soon, Lin Kuei took Lin Xiao back to Lin Jing's place. After opening the locked door, they went upstairs from the corridor downstairs. On the 5th floor, there were more than a dozen single rooms, and only 2 of them had the smell of living people. Lin Xiao took Duan Wan and Lin Kuei to one of the rooms. He raised his hand and knocked on the door, rhythmically greeting, "Is there anyone inside?" He knew that there was someone inside, but he still asked if there was anyone inside. Moreover, the knocking was neither light nor heavy, and there was a rhythm to it. It was also to tell the people inside that they didn't mean any harm. After waiting for a while, they didn't hear any movement inside. Lin Xiao was not in a hurry. He knocked on the door again and said, "I know there is someone inside. Please open the door. I want to ask you for a favor." There was more than one person inside, and there was more than one person. Seeing that the people inside still refused to come out, Lin Xiao could only change his tone. "If you don't open the door, we will force our way in." Although Lin Xiao threatened him verbally, he didn't actually break the door open. Instead, he waited quietly for a while. After more than 10 seconds, he heard the sound of someone walking inside. Soon, the footsteps came behind the door, followed by the sound of a lock being unlocked. The door was opened a crack, and a woman in her 30s appeared behind the crack. The woman stared at Lin Xiao and Duan Wan vigilantly and asked in a low voice, What do you want?" "Don't worry, we won't go in. We just want to ask a few questions." Lin Xiao smiled pleasantly and asked, "Do you know a person called Ling Jing who used to live in that house? Do you know what happened to her house?" The woman in the crack looked at Lin Xiao inquisitively and then looked at the direction Lin Xiao was pointing. After thinking for a while, she asked Lin Xiao, "Who are you? Why are you asking about her?" Lin Xiao looked at her. She already knew the answer she wanted without asking. She smiled and said, "Oh, she has a younger brother who was separated from her a few years ago. Now he asked me to find her." She felt that this woman didn't have any malicious intentions towards Ling Jing, because Ling Jing was quite a good person and got along well with her neighbors. Therefore, when this woman mentioned Ling Jing's name just now, her mind immediately became vigilant. She had a vague thought that if Lin Xiao was a bad guy, she would cover for Lin Jing. Impossible. She said that her brother died during the apocalypse. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. Lin Xiao smiled and made up a story. "No, he's not dead. Ling Jing didn't see him die with his own eyes. He was just in a bad state after awakening his ability. In fact, he had been secretly protecting Ling Jing for the past few years. You also know about this, right? There's always a mysterious person protecting Ling Jing. If it's her brother, why didn't he show up? Why is he hiding?" The woman clearly didn't believe Lin Xiao's words, but she thought it was very likely. "Because he's disfigured," Lin Xiao continued. "He's too ugly to see people now, so he doesn't dare to see his sister, Lin Kuei, who was hiding in a corner and was described as disfigured." The woman's eyes flickered and looked at Lin Xiao hesitantly. "Is it really her brother? What do you think his name is?" Lin Xiao said, "Lin Kuei." The woman's eyes lit up. "That's right. But didn't you say that he has been secretly protecting Ling Jing? Why don't you know where he is now?" Lin Xiao could only continue to make up stories. "Because he was seriously injured and has been recuperating until now. He only thought of looking for her when he knew that China's base was besieged by the zombie tide. He didn't expect that the house had been empty for a long time. She left. She had been working as a maid in someone's house. But half a year ago, the man of the house got drunk and probably made a move on Ling Jing. Then, Ling Jing was ready to quit. Who would have thought that the woman of the house didn't like Ling Jing? After the incident, she insisted that Ling Jing was the one who seduced her man. She brought people to take revenge on her several times. Fortunately, she was smart enough to hide in the house. She didn't give that woman a chance to harm her." Seeing Lin Xiao patiently explaining, the woman finally sighed and told him about Ling Jing. In fact, Lin Xiao already knew about these things in her mind. After Ling Jing was stopped by that woman a few times, she knew that she couldn't survive in this base anymore. Because the man of that family was a metahuman and a low-ranking official. But he was afraid of his wife because the lawsuit of his father-in-law was bigger than his. So in order not to offend his wife's family, the man allowed his wife to bully others. Therefore, Ling Jing's life was oppressed, and it became harder and harder to survive. In the end, she had no choice. In order to survive and leave this place, She took out all her belongings and hired a few metahumans to escort her to the Meng tribe, which was the closest to China's base. What happened to her later? Was she harmed by that woman? Lin Xiao asked her, then slightly tilted her head and glanced at Lin Kuei's direction. No, she found a chance to run away. At that time, that woman sent people to guard downstairs. She begged us to help her find a few metahumans and then left with her. I heard that they went to the Meng tribe's base. Although the conditions there are a little worse, it is close to China's base. The woman finally said, because Ling Jing could only afford to go to the Meng tribe, she couldn't afford to pay if it was too far away. Even if the conditions at the Meng tribe were bad, at least she didn't have any enemies there. It might be dangerous for her to be unfamiliar with the place, but it was still better than staying in China's base and being killed by that woman at any time. Went to the Meng tribe? Okay, we know. Thank you. This is a thank you gift for you. Please keep it carefully. After Lin Xiao got the information she wanted, she took out a few level 3 and 2 level 4 zombie cores and handed them to her. The lowest levels she had were level 3 zombie cores. She had level 4 and level 5 ones, but she didn't dare to give too many. She was afraid that it would bring trouble to this ordinary woman. Lin Xiao could sense that there were 4 people in the room, including the woman in front of her, but they were all ordinary people without metahumans. When the woman saw that Lin Xiao wanted to give her something, she awkwardly said, "No, no, no. It's just a few words. You can't give such a precious thing." Lin Xiao said, "Don't talk, just take it. Quickly before others see it. That's it, we're leaving." As she said that, she directly put the zombie cores in her hand into the woman's hand, then took a step back, turned around, and left with Duan Wan. Chapter 784. Lin Xiao looked at Lin Kuei and said, "You heard it. Your sister should be at the Meng tribe. Can you go by yourself?" Lin Kuei nodded. He heard what the woman said, but he was a bit hesitant. "Are you sure what she said is true?" Lin Xiao nodded. "Yes, I can feel her psychological reaction." Lin Kuei heaved a sigh of relief and said, "All right, I'll look for it myself. Bring them with you. If anything happens, tell them to come back and find me." Lin Xiao looked at Mo and Yi Qingxian. Lin Kuei looked at the 2 level 1 kings and nodded. Then he quietly left Huaxiao base with the 2 level 1 kings. Lin Xiao returned to the wall and continued to watch how Sikong-chan was going to deal with the zombie emperor. That zombie emperor is very cunning. It immediately retreated when we chased after it, and there are a few level 2 kings around it. Sikong-chan stood on top of the wall. Although his face was expressionless, his eyes became gloomy. "A few? That many?" Lan Lu frowned. It was very difficult to reach level 7 zombies. The highest level in his base was still level 6. Why did he suddenly feel that level 7 zombies were like cabbages? Everywhere? There were a few in the Universal base, and then there was one in Huaxia base. Now there were a few more. At least 4 to 5, and some level 1 kings. Sikong-chan frowned. The 40-year-old man looked 7 or 8 years younger than his actual age because of the energy recovery of his ability. Because he always had a serious expression, a strong look, and a steady temperament. He gave people the charm of a mature man. Gao Haoyun stood beside him, even though they were both level 8 metahumans. Even though the 2 of them were about the same age, their temperament was still a lot lower than Sikong-chan's. Only Wu Qingyue looked much younger than the 2 of them. But Wu Qingyue's temperament was gentle and steady, and he always had a smile on his face. His temperament did not lose to Sikong-chan at all. Although his temperament was not as strong as a mature man like Sikong-chan, Wu Qingyue's handsome face also suppressed the mature, manly temperament of Sikong-chan. Since Lin Xiao was not here, Wu Qingyue smiled casually and said, "A zombie emperor will definitely control level 1 or level 2 kings. Let's not worry about that for now. First, we need to kill this zombie emperor, then the rest will be easy." The sky had already darkened, and it would soon be dark. As soon as the sun set, the temperature immediately dropped by 10 to 20 degrees. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to stay outside for long. When the humans could not stand it, the zombies would be affected as well. When the humans could not stand it, the zombies would be affected as well. The temperature was too low, and the zombies became less energetic, and their movements were not as flexible. However, because of the zombie emperor's command, they had no choice but to continue moving forward and climbing up slowly. It's been 6 hours. That's how long it took for the berserk lightning zone to disappear, Ho Guozhong, who was standing behind Si Kong-chun, said. He was referring to the chaotic thunder and lightning from before. The lightning that's bombarding the gate this time is clearly different from the previous ones. The previous ones didn't seem to have any control over them. Any electronic equipment would be swallowed by the magnetic field. However, the one at the gate was clearly controlled by the zombie emperor. Then, why did it only start to control the thunderstorm now? Lan Lu touched his chin and asked. Perhaps your appearance has caused the zombie emperor to feel a sense of danger, Si Kong-chun said with a solemn expression on his face. That's very likely. Wu Qingyue smiled and nodded. Lan Lu glanced at Wu Qingyue with an ambiguous look. Lan Lu was sure that the Universal Base knew about the zombie emperor's rage. As long as it was the same kind, it would know better than humans. But Lan Lu did not know if Wu Qingyue knew about it from the female zombie leader. Also, Wu Qingyue was chasing after the female leader. But did he know that the female leader was a zombie? After chasing for so long, the female leader seemed to be very resistant. It was obvious that she did not tell him the truth. He didn't know if Wu Qingyue really managed to get her one day, only to find out that she was a female zombie. He could only look at her, but not touch her. What kind of expression would she have? Wu Qingyue looked at Lan Lu and felt that the expression of this level 8 psychic was a bit strange. Was this person imagining something strange? When the thunderstorm happened, it must be where the zombie emperor was. Now, we don't know where it is and we can't determine its whereabouts. Then we can only wait for the thunderstorm to happen again and then rush over to surround it. At that time, we will have to trouble leader Wu to help us deal with the thunderstorm. Si Kong-chun thought for a while and looked at Wu Qingyue for advice. No problem. As long as the thunderstorm appears, I will go in and take a look. Who knows, I might be able to kill this zombie emperor without you guys doing anything, Wu Qingyue joked. Everyone smiled and said, isn't it better if that's the case? It will save us a lot of trouble. Although Si Kong-chun's serious face was expressionless, he still said lightly, if you can do it, then go ahead. Wu Qingyue shrugged and continued to smile. What if I succeed? The zombie core will belong to me. You guys won't fight with me for it, right? I won't. Si Kong-chun shook his head. The others also laughed and shook their heads. If it's all about ability, whoever kills the zombie emperor will naturally get the zombie core. At this time, Lu Jinan coldly snorted and said, Yo, you guys are already talking about the ownership of the zombie core? Speaking of which, are you guys sure you can kill him? What if he is stimulated by you guys and directly evolves to level 9? At this time, a cold female voice with a hint of laughter could be heard. Everyone looked up and saw Lin Xiao with his hands in the pockets of his military jacket, walking over with his long legs and military boots. There was a faint smile on his gorgeous face. If he really evolves to level 9, then all of humanity can only gang up on him. When Gao Haoyun saw Lin Xiao, his eyes immediately lit up. Then, she said before the others could say anything. Si Kong-chun and the others thought that she was just joking. Only Wu Qingyue and Lan Lu's eyes flashed. If he really evolves, then even nuclear weapons can't kill him. Even nuclear weapons can't kill it. Lin Xiao sneered at Gao Haoyun and said, Why don't you give it a try? Throw a nuclear bomb at him? Chapter 785. If I kill the zombie emperor, will Miss Lu accept me? Gao Haoyun smiled evilly. His gaze became unscrupulous as he looked at Lin Xiao. Leader Gao does not seem to care about giving up the Black Dragon base. You even have the mood to flirt with a beauty. Lan Lu laughed and looked at Gao Haoyun with a strange gaze. Gao Haoyun was startled for a moment before he smiled. Even if I care, isn't it already occupied by the zombies? Even if he was unhappy, he would not show it to these people. From what I know, the Black Dragon base was attacked by the zombie horde. However, after you left, The other leader seemed to have saved the survivors in the base and was still making a last stand. It is the same now. Have you thought of going back? Lan Lu's eyes flashed as he asked. The meaning in his words was, you left your companions there and ran away by yourself. Have you never thought of going back to save them? Even if I want to go back, Du Qunxing might not be willing. After all, the zombie emperor might be staring at me. If I go back, it might be lured back. Gao Haoyun snorted. Because they had to keep an eye on the zombie emperor, no one went to rest. Even if they wanted to rest, it would only be a short nap. However, these were all high-rank metahumans, with their own energy running. Not sleeping for a month or two would not affect them. The houses not far away from the city walls were used as temporary resting places for the injured soldiers and metahumans to recuperate. Sikong Chun ordered his men to clear out a living room upstairs. There were enough chairs for people to sit and rest in the room. However, the group did not sleep or rest for the entire night and did not see any signs of a minefield. At this time, Mo Yin was sitting on the roof of a building tens of kilometers away from the Huaxia base. He was not in a good state. Mo Yin did not know that the humans were waiting for him to go berserk, but the appearance of Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao made him cautious. Previously, when he lost control, he was not afraid of the enemy approaching because anyone who approached would be struck by lightning. However, it was different now. The leader of Ocean City was not afraid of lightning. If he lost control again and allowed the leader of Ocean City to approach him, he would be in danger. That was why he had to suppress his anger. But this could not be suppressed at all. Even if the female zombie healed him, it couldn't stop his increasingly irritable mood. That was why he had retreated far away from the Huaxia base when he was about to explode. This way, even if he flared up, Sikong Chen and the others wouldn't be able to find him so quickly. Mo Yin leaned against the wall of the stairwell, his long legs stretched out in front of him. His head hung low in front of his chest. Although she couldn't see his expression, she could tell from his tightly clenched fists that he seemed to be enduring something. Moreover, the veins on his neck became active again, already crawling all over his face. The female zombie squatted next to him and pressed her hand on his shoulder. Her expressionless face was slightly frowning. He tried his best to transfer his energy into Mo Yan's body. Roar! Mo Yan let out a low growl from his throat, as if he was in great pain. When the sun was about to rise, the female zombie's expression suddenly changed. She retracted her hand and immediately retreated. Roar! Mo Yin raised his head and roared with a ferocious face. Boom! Rumble! Bang, 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 bang. A few chaotic bolts of lightning struck down from the sky, exploding on the surrounding buildings. Following that, black clouds rolled up in the sky, and there were irregular lightning bolts flashing in the clouds. Then it started to rain down one after another. The first bolt had just fallen, but the second had already followed. Then the third, the fourth. In the blink of an eye, there were hundreds and thousands of lightning bolts of all sizes falling down chaotically. The area within a few hundred meters of the square garden was a complete mess. The female zombie dodged very quickly. She only stopped when she was about 700 or 800 meters away from Mo Yin. Her hair and dress were a lot messy. She raised her pair of black eyes that were as black as a panda's, expressionlessly looking at Mo Yan's position. Within a few seconds, the place had turned into a terrifying minefield. The buildings, flowers, and trees in the minefield were all struck into pieces. Then, there were black smoke and flames. The female zombie couldn't understand why her boss would often lose control during this period of time. Even her ability couldn't stop his condition from worsening. Could it be that she was too weak? After all, Mo Yin was already level 8 and was about to break through to level 9, while she was still lingering around level 5. If her level was the same as Mo Yan's, would she be able to suppress Mo Yan's manic behavior? A few figures landed next to the female zombie. They were Mo Yan's subordinates, the level 2 kings. Mo Yan had ordered them to protect the female zombie when he went berserk and didn't know what was going on. Because the female zombie was only level 5, and she was a healer, her strength was too weak. He was afraid that when he went berserk, the female zombie would be killed by humans. Then he would be finished. Mo Yin had given her a lot of zombie cores to level up, but this female zombie's body was too special. She couldn't absorb zombie cores of different types. She could only absorb zombie cores of level 2 or 3 zombies that hadn't awakened their abilities yet. But when she reached level 4 or 5, absorbing zombie cores of level 2 or 3 was much slower than a snail. And to find zombies of the same type, it was even rarer. It was even rarer than the lightning type. Even if there was, it would be very difficult to level up. That was why Mo Yin couldn't do anything about the female zombie's level. Roar dash, Mo Yan's face was twisted, and his purple eyes were wide open. He opened his mouth wide and roared, showing his sharp teeth. As he roared, more and more lightning bolts fell, and the area was getting bigger and bigger. Suddenly, his body twitched, and he threw himself off the roof. Bang! He smashed onto the ground, then climbed up shakily as if nothing had happened. The next second, he rushed to the wall next to him and slammed into it. Bang dash, the wall was smashed by him, and a hole was formed. As he went berserk, the zombies that had been moving towards China's base immediately ran like crazy. Soon, the people in China's base noticed it. The zombies are going berserk. The person in charge of monitoring the situation immediately shouted because he saw the zombies behind the zombies rushing towards them from afar. Their movements were very fast and crazy, and their expressions were ferocious. As soon as Sikong Chun and the others heard the news, they immediately came out of the building and flashed to the top of the wall. Using the binoculars, they saw the zombies behind them rushing forward like a tide. The zombies are restless. It should be a lightning zone. Sikong Chun immediately looked around with the binoculars, but he didn't see the familiar lightning. Chapter 786. Wu Qinghua looked around and said, "I can't see him from here. He's hiding far away." Sikong Chun put down his binoculars and asked, "Leader Wu, can you sense where he is?" Wu Qinghua looked at the sky, then pointed to a darker part of the sky and said, "Do you see that? The clouds are very low over there. Although it's a bit far, I can feel the power of lightning coming from there." Sikong Chun looked at the clouds over there. It was indeed a bit far. He couldn't help but ask Wu Qinghua, "How far is it?" Wu Qinghua shook his head. "I'm not sure, but at least the direction is correct." "Leader Wu, are you sure?" Gao Haoyan walked to Sikong Chen's side and looked at Wu Qinghua with some disdain. He looked at him with a face of suspicion. "You can choose not to go, but if I go, the corpse core will be mine," Wu Qinghua said to him with a smirk. Then, in a flash, he flew out. Seeing Wu Qinghua fly out by himself, Gao Haoyun and Sikong Chen looked at each other and immediately followed. "Leader Wu is young and strong. He's actually quite a good match for you." "What? You don't like him?" Seeing that the 3 level 8 ability users had rushed out, Lan Lu silently moved to Lin Xiao's side and asked casually, "You like him? Then you go." Lin Xiao glanced at him expressionlessly and said, "Also, why are you so close? Do I know you that well?" She took 2 steps to the side and put some distance between Lan Lu and her. "No need. I'm heterosexual. Perhaps this is the first time we've met, but I'm not a stranger to you. At least I don't think other people know as much about you as I do." Lan Lu looked at Lin Xiao and smiled. Lan Lu felt that Lin Xiao's identity as a zombie must be a secret that she kept to herself, especially since it would affect her position among humans. So he felt that Lin Xiao would definitely not let others know about this secret. Lin Xiao saw that he was smiling with ulterior motives and said, "Oh, then how much do you know, Director Lan? This is not a suitable place to say it. But then again, isn't it dangerous for you to be the leader of a human base?" Lan Lu asked, "What identity? I don't understand what you're talking about." Lin Xiao looked at him and smiled calmly. Lan Lu didn't pursue the matter. He just shrugged and said, "Well, then we'll talk about it when you understand. Do you think they'll be able to find the zombie emperor's location and kill him?" As he said that, he turned his head and looked in the direction that Sikong Chun and the others had just left. In the battle on China's side, Chen Hao was killed by Cheng Wangxue. Lu Tong heaved a sigh of relief after learning that Chen Hao was dead. On the other side, Wang Jian had also received news of Chen Hao's suicidal actions. Although Wang Jian was still an ordinary person who had yet to awaken his special ability, he was still an ordinary person. However, if he was given a weapon, he would definitely have the ability to move freely in the dangerous environment of zombies outside the base. Therefore, as long as he didn't encounter zombies above level 2 or 3, he could be considered powerful. However, his reputation was much stronger than his skills. After all, he was the one who led such a large group of people from the Netherworld King's base to the Universal Base. Therefore, the second batch of people that entered the spirit world were mostly led by Wang Jian, forming a group. Wang Jian was tacitly accepted as the leader of the group. This Chun Hao's brain must have short-circuited. He actually dared to offend the vice leader just to kill Lu Tong. Isn't that courting death? Wang Jian sneered. Huang Tinga also laughed. That's right. Now it's time for us to make our move. Wang Jian nodded, then suddenly asked, what's the situation with Xiao Liangting? Xiao Liangting was the ability user that awakened halfway through. After entering the base, he was brought to the isolation room and had been there until now. Huang Tinga said, from what Haizi said, it should be soon. Wang Jian sighed and said, I don't know what kind of ability he will awaken. All right, I heard that this base is to be built on 2 sides. One side is for humans, but the other isn't. The others don't know what's on the other side, but I have a feeling that this base is different from the others. This base seems to be different from the others, Huang Tinga said. 2 sides? Isn't it supposed to be the outer and inner areas? Wang Jian looked at him strangely. His tough face was a little confused. The current structure of the base was to build a wall around the inner area and then build an outer area around the inner area. This was the first time he had heard of a base that was divided into 2 sides. What's more, wasn't the other side inhabited by humans? Huang Tinga suddenly looked to his left and right with a vigilant expression. Then he whispered into Wang Jian's ear, I think that there might be a group of zombies living on the other side. That's because I've also found a secret. There's a plantation not far from this base. I heard that it was personally developed by the female leader. Right now, that place is rich in sweet potatoes, corn, pumpkins, and potatoes. But the workers there aren't humans. I heard that they're all zombies. When Wang Jian heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then he stared at him in disbelief. Suddenly, his eyes turned, as if he had thought of something, and his expression relaxed. He nodded and said, that's possible, because when we came in, weren't we blocked by a group of strange zombies? And there was also that strange female zombie. Don't you think that female zombie's IQ is too high? If it wasn't for the fact that her face looked like a zombie's, her actions wouldn't have been anything like a zombie's. Huang Tinga also nodded his head. Thinking of that female zombie, he immediately said with a bitter expression, she even threw me. Ha ha ha, look at her impatient expression at that time. Who told you guys to dawdle around? Wang Jian laughed as he recalled the scene at that time. I'm just scared. Who has ever seen such a human-like zombie before? As soon as she got close to me, I was scared silly. Huang Tinga said awkwardly. For a young lad in his 20s, this was the first time he had ever seen a zombie that would slap the hood of a car and chase people away. All right, don't talk about this kind of thing. Don't ask about things that you shouldn't ask about, lest you attract unnecessary trouble. Wang Jian waved his hand and said, understood. Huang Tinga nodded his head. Since Chun Hao is dead, then we'll pay more attention to Lu Tong and Li Honglin's movements. For the time being, don't provoke them. First, we need to establish a firm foothold here. Before entering the base, we'll slowly settle the debt of capturing our people to lure the zombies. Wang Jian crossed his arms, and his expression became cold. Yes. I'll warn everyone, Huang Tinga replied. Right at this time, someone ran over to the 2 of them and said happily, Captain, Xiao Liangting is awake. Wang Jian and Huang Tinga's eyes lit up. They immediately stood up and said, let's go take a look. Chapter 787. In the awakening isolation room, Lin Hao and a few nurses stood by the bed and asked about Xiao Liangting's situation. How do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Xiao Liangting was a very thin man lying on the bed. His face was pale, but his spirit was not bad. His eyes looked very spirited. He shook his head and said with a weak and hoarse voice, "There's no discomfort." "Thank you." Lin Hao helped him check his body and found that his body was better than when he was first sent here. Moreover, he was full of spirit. Even if his face was as pale as paper, one could see that he was full of vitality. It was said that before this person awakened, he was about to die from illness. In the end, no one knew how he managed to survive until he reached their base and then awakened. This journey to the gates of hell was full of twists and turns. But was it also a blessing in disguise? After the examination, Lin Hao said to Xiao Liangting with a faint expression, "Your body is recovering very well now. Rest well. When your ability just awakened, it may not feel as clear as now. Slowly, you will be able to feel the flow of energy in your body." Xiao Liangting smiled slightly. Although his face was so thin that there was not much meat on it, if one looked carefully, one would find that his facial features were still very good. When he smiled, he looked much better. Lin Hao's expression was indifferent. He just nodded and did not say anything more. At this time, the people who went out with Lin Feng to collect resources encountered trouble. Bang dash, this was next to a park. A huge fireball exploded on the metal color, and it was wildly twitching countless vines. Every time they came out, they would bring grass balls stained with Lin Xiao's blood, so zombies generally avoided them when they saw them. Only these mutants would ignore the pressure in Lin Xiao's blood and attack them. Originally, the level 7 fire element was already very strong, but when it encountered the level 7 mutant vine, Lin Feng's chances of winning were not high. Originally, Wood was afraid of fire, but when the level 7 vine used its countless vine tentacles to cover the entire park, even if Lin Feng's flame hit these moving and attacking vines, it could not ignite them. That was because this vine was of the metal element. Of course, metal was also afraid of fire. However, when the same level metal element met the fire element, the human side's power was weaker. The swinging vine tentacles turned into steel-like tentacles that could kill anyone who stood in their way. Clang! Long Qingying held her katana with both hands and slashed at the metal vine that was as thick as an arm. Ugh! The recoil from the collision caused her hands to tremble violently. Long Qingying almost let go of the saber in her hand. Long Qingying gritted her teeth, and her face turned red. Her metal ability was completely useless here. The metal attribute of the vine suppressed her ability attack and even absorbed her energy. That's right, they had come for her from the very beginning. The energy aura of the same attribute woke the vine up, and it suddenly launched an attack when they passed by. In front of this level 7 metal attribute mutant plant, bullets were naturally useless. He could only use his abilities to attack. What should we do? If this goes on, leader, vice leader, and Leader Long won't be able to hold on. Lin Yu, who was standing beside Lin Wenwen, looked anxiously at the battle a few hundred meters away. Lin Wenwen was also very anxious. She kept her binoculars and stared at the battle, but she forced herself to calm down. She knew that their strength was not enough, so she could only retreat far away. Long Qingying was getting more and more perilous under the attack of countless metal vines. Her brother was also entangled and could not escape to save Long Qingying. On the other side, there was Li Zheng, who could not freeze the wildly swinging vines even with his ice ability. Lin Wenwen felt her breathing quicken. What should I do? What should I do? What was the weakness of the metal element? It was even more troublesome when the wood and metal elements were mixed together. What was the weakness of such a large group of metal vines? Lin Wenwen wished that she was a physics student in the past. Maybe she could have known what kind of plant this was, or maybe she could have known the weakness of this vine. But it was useless to think about that now, because this was a mutated plant, and it was level 7. Because of the sudden attack of this huge vine, more than half of Lin Feng's team was directly killed. Fortunately, Lin Feng's reaction was fast. Although he blocked some of the attacks in time, only 1/3 of the people were saved. And Lin Wenwen's reaction was much more agile after the previous persistent training. so she was not wrapped up by those metal vines and dragged away. Then, with the help of Lin Yu, Li Zheng, and the others, they quickly retreated from the danger zone. Now that they had evacuated the danger zone, they could only watch Lin Feng and Long Qingying fight on the side. I'm afraid that if they can't hold on until the leader comes to rescue. Feng Mingyu's face was a little pale, and she looked at Lin Wenwen in panic. This place is more than 100 kilometers away from the base. If they can come with my sister's speed, there will be no problem. If only Lily was also in the base. Now I'm more worried about whether my sister will be in the base. Lin Wenwen bit her finger, and her face and forehead were fine beads of sweat. The possibility was also very high. The other people's faces also turned pale. At this time, a thought flashed across Lin Wenwen's mind, and she murmured, If only I could bring people into the space like my sister. Even if you can bring people into the space, you can't get close to them. You can't save them like this. Lin Yu reminded her. Lin Wenwen was stunned, and her eyes were a little red as she looked at Lin Yu. Then, she turned her head and looked ahead absent-mindedly. Then what should I do? What should I do? Ching Ching, big brother. At this time, Lin Wenwen suddenly hated herself for being too weak. Too weak. Although she couldn't see Lin Feng and the others clearly from a distance of a few hundred meters, she could clearly see the huge, shining cold metal vine. Lin Wenwen's mind was a little confused, and she stared at the mutated vine that was swinging its countless vines in a frenzy. One moment, her mind was filled with the scene of Long Qingying and Lin Feng fighting. The next moment, she thought that her sister would be able to come, and the next moment, she thought about what to do if her sister was not in the base. Then, she thought about how it would be better if they didn't pass by here. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, and Lin Wenwen felt like her head was going to explode. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no! Deputy Leader!" Lin Wenwen reflexively took out the binoculars to look, and saw that Lin Feng's chest was penetrated by a thick metal vine. "No! Big brother!" Lin Wenwen's mind exploded, and her mind was shaken. Suddenly, she felt dizzy, and the whole world was blurred. Chapter 788. Just when Lin Feng's chest was penetrated by the metal vines, his body stiffened. Lin Xiao, who was far away in Huaxia, felt a strange feeling rise in her heart. This feeling made Lin Xiao feel uncomfortable, as if a hard stone had suddenly blocked her heart. But very quickly, this feeling immediately disappeared. Lin Xiao felt that the uncomfortable feeling in her heart was just an illusion. Lin Wenwen felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. "What's wrong?" Suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm, and a familiar cold female voice came from beside her ear. Lin Wenwen shook her head, and her expression suddenly froze. Then, she quickly turned her head to look at Long Qingying, who was supporting her, puzzled. Long Qingying saw that her expression was a little strange, and couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Lin Wenwen looked at her blankly for a few seconds and suddenly turned her head to look around, and then realized that she was sitting in a room. The somewhat familiar environment in front of her stunned her, and she couldn't quite react. "What's wrong?" Lin Feng, who was sitting by the window drinking water, heard Long Qingying's voice, turned his head to look at her, and saw that his sister's expression was a little dazed. He couldn't help but ask. Lin Wenwen blinked, and then took a deep breath. She suddenly stood up, ran to the window, and looked out, then raised her arm to look at her watch. Sure enough, it showed that it was 11:30 in the afternoon. However, when they were attacked by the metal vines just now, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. And here, before they encountered the metal vines, was about 20 to 30 kilometers away from the park. Moreover, before they were attacked by the metal vines, they had also rested in this place in the morning. Lin Wenwen's heart was beating a little fast. She looked left and right and then looked at everyone in the room. Everyone was there, and no one was missing. "Brother, hit me!" She suddenly turned to Lin Feng, who was next to her, and said urgently. Lin Feng. After looking at Lin Wenwen in silence for 3 seconds, Lin Feng turned his head to look at the others, with an expression that said, "Is this girl okay?" At this moment, Everyone's attention was attracted by Lin Wenwen's sudden action. When they saw Miss Lin asking the deputy leader to hit her, and when they saw Lin Feng looking at them blankly, they were all dumbfounded. "Brother, quick, hit me. Let's see if I'm dreaming." However, Lin Wenwen did not notice the expressions on everyone's faces. She anxiously pulled Lin Feng's arm and raised it to her face. Lin Feng. No matter how calm he was, Lin Feng couldn't help but look at Lin Wenwen as if he was looking at a lunatic. Hurry up and fight. I'll forget it." Seeing that his brother was ignoring him, Lin Wenwen simply raised his hand and flung it at her delicate face. "Pa!" The crisp sound of a slap stunned everyone once again. "Ouch!" Lin Wenwen cried out in pain. Then he suddenly raised his hand and quickly grabbed onto Lin Feng's clothes. He stared at him with wide eyes and cried, "Brother!" "Woo!" This time, Lin Feng was dumbfounded again. He threw away the moisturizing cup in his hand and stared at his sister, who had suddenly burst into tears. What's wrong? Why are you crying?" Lin Feng looked at Lin Wenwen with a head full of question marks. The adult man in his 40s turned to look at the others helplessly. Long Qingying and the others also came over and looked at Lin Wenwen with concern. "What's wrong, miss? Tell us. Why are you crying all of a sudden?" Lin Wenwen's mind was filled with the scene of Lin Feng's chest being pierced by the metal vines. The fear in her heart could not be erased no matter how hard she tried. Seeing that Lin Feng was still standing in front of her, alive and well, she even couldn't believe it. Everyone looked at each other with a blank look on their faces. Fortunately, Lin Wenwen quickly stopped crying. Then, she wiped her tears and looked at everyone again to confirm. "What's going on?" Long Qingying couldn't help but frown as she looked at her friend. Lin Wenwen shook her head and quickly wiped away the traces of tears on her face. She gradually calmed down, but her hands did not let go of Lin Feng's clothes. "What's going on? Why did she suddenly return to a few hours ago? Could it be that the metal vines and the scene behind them were all her hallucinations? Or was she dreaming? Impossible. It felt so real. It couldn't be a dream, nor was it an illusion. When she woke up from a dream, there would be a sense of distortion, but she didn't feel it at all. What was going on?" Lin Wenwen didn't understand what was going on either. She suddenly raised her head and asked Lin Feng, "Brother, which way should we go back in the afternoon?" "This way." Lin Feng took out a map and pointed to a location. Lin Wenwen looked, and it was indeed the road that they had walked before. Then, in the afternoon, they were suddenly attacked. Because they had Lin Xiao's blood breath to protect them, they were a lot less guarded against low-level zombies. Instead, they were vigilant of places with forests and mountains to avoid meeting mutants. So, they would usually avoid places that were close to the city parks or forests. When they encountered the metal vines, they actually wanted to avoid the park. But there was only one main road there. The others were all small roads. Their truck couldn't pass through unless they took a long detour. But if they took a detour, it would take at least 3 to 4 hours. So, Lin Feng decided to be more vigilant and pass through the park as soon as possible. But he didn't expect that Long Qingying's metal energy would be sensed by the metal vines. As a result, they suffered a devastating attack. Lin Wenwen slightly lowered her head, hiding the emotions in her eyes. Then, she slowly raised her head and looked at the map in Lin Feng's hand. She pointed to another road and said, "Brother, let's go this way." Lin Feng looked at her strangely, and then looked at the others blankly. He saw that everyone was also looking at him strangely. Then he looked down and asked Lin Wenwen why. "If we go this way, we might not be able to get back to the base until noon tomorrow. If they went the way he pointed out, they would be able to get back to the base at 9 or 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." Lin Wenwen raised her head and looked at him, then looked at Long Qingying, who was also confused. Then she said, "Let's go this way. I remember I heard that there was a cement factory in this town. Let's go this way and see if we can find it." She casually told a small lie. She couldn't just say that Lin Feng's road was dangerous, right? Then Lin Feng definitely wouldn't believe her, and he wouldn't listen to her. Then, in order to make Lin Feng believe her, she would have to spend a lot of time explaining the situation. But if she said that she could predict that they would be in danger 5 or 6 hours later, and that they would die here, who would believe her? Especially Lin Feng, who was a soldier. He wouldn't believe her. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.